5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. I want to call this meeting to order. Tonight, we are using closed caption on the YouTube live stream, so please speak clearly for those speaking during the meeting so the closed captions are all as accurate as possible. Let me see, we have a little bit of a different annotated. Nope, okay, we're good. So what I'd like to do first is welcome everyone that's here tonight, and what you could stand with me to recite the Pledge of Allegiance if you're able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios indivisible con libertad y justicia para todos. Thank you. So now I'm going to ask for a moment of silence for those who've given their lives in service of our country, but also a moment of silence for our schools, our staff, our communities, our children who have just started schools so that we can make sure that they have an extraordinary year. Thank you for sharing that moment with me and all of us here tonight. Ms. King, we have a roll call, please.
Peggy Mueller-Aragon.
Here.
Danielle Gonzalez. Barbara Peterson.
Here.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Here.
Josefina Dominguez.
Here.
Courtney Jackson.
Here.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Here. So our first item is approval of the August 16th, 2023 Board of Education meeting agenda. Please remember that there's some consents on that. So if something needs to be pulled off, now would be the time to do it, but I'm going to ask for a motion.
I'll move for approval of the August 16, 2023 Board of Education meeting agenda.
I'll second. This is Courtney.
All right. Thank you. May I have a roll call, please?
Peggy Mueller-Aragon.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. So our next item is approval of the minutes from the Board of Education meeting on August the 2nd, 2023, and the special Board of Education meeting held on July 26th, 2023. May I have a motion on this, please?
I will move to approve the minutes from the Board of Education meeting on August 2nd, 2023, and the special Board of Education meeting on July 26th, 2023.
I'll second. This is Josefina.
Thank you. We'll have a roll call, please.
Peggy Mueller-Aragon.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. So our next item is public forum, and Secretary Jackson, will you please share the instructions for the forum?
Welcome to our public forum guests. When you signed up to speak, you were asked to review the rules and expectations which our presiding officer will enforce. The New Mexico Open Meetings Act requires that our agendas specify in advance the items that will be discussed and voted on during the meeting. Therefore, public forum is not a dialogue among speakers and board members, but rather a chance to hear from our community. We will call participants to speak in the order they signed up, whether in person or virtual. Those here with us tonight will be asked to come to the microphone in the center aisle at the back of the room when your name is called. Online guests will stay in a virtual waiting room until it is their turn to speak. When it is your time, you will be escorted into the main meeting space. Please turn your audio and video on. Once your speaking time is up, you will be ushered back into the waiting room. When you are finished speaking, you may choose to leave the meeting and watch it on live stream. We have set aside 45 minutes for public forum. Because there are fewer than 22 speakers tonight, each of you will have 2 minutes to speak. Please be concise and try not to repeat what others have said. Tonight, there are 13 speakers. Once your time is up, you will be directed to complete your sentence quickly so that others may speak. You may not yield your unused time to another speaker. If you we will get to all the speakers tonight, but if you feel that you were unable to convey your message, you may also email us at boarded@aps.edu. In addition, for those of you who are here tonight, a representative from our service center is here to assist you. Mr. Gonzalez, will you please introduce our speakers?
Thank you, Board Member Jackson. Our first speaker is in person. It is Shatron Kedwell. Shatron Kidwell. Hi, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Thank you.
In the last 6 months, I have had the opportunity to attend the right sizing working group meetings. And in that time, I have learned a lot. I have sat and listened and watched and had some good conversations. And there's also been time for reflection. And with regard to the Coronado expansion plan, I thought I knew going in the scope of the issue, but it turns out I only knew part of it. After 6 months of being forced to mostly listen, I now understand that the Coronado parents, the lack of a feeder middle school for them is scary for them because middle school is scary for parents. And I remember that fear. But now that I understand the scope of that issue, I can see the way forward. And rather than walling them off in their own separate program, we need to build a bridge for them so that they can join the rest of the APS bilingual community. Washington is one of the oldest bilingual programs, and we just need to throw our arms open wide, and we need to embrace the new kid on the block. I'm a Coronado, Washington parent, and I'm so excited to start building that bridge because I have been to that mountaintop and I know how great it is up there. So if we can integrate the Coronado students into the Washington program, that's the way that everybody wins. Somebody needs to step up and tell those parents that they do have a solid option right up the road. And if you all can at least press pause on the expansion plan, then we can have a chance to build that bridge. Thank you.
Our next few speakers are on Zoom. Nicolette Sigmund is joining now. Maybe not. Okay. Nicolette, are you there?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, Nicolette, you have 2 minutes
I'm
once
so
you begin.
sorry. Okay.
You're okay. Once you begin speaking, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, my name is Nicolette Sigmund. My husband Lance and I have raised our 4 children in Albuquerque over the last 20 years. We have 2 college-age kids that went through APS, as well as 2 kids currently in 8th grade and 12th grade. I would like to voice my concerns over the time changes and how they have negatively impacted our family. I would also like to offer constructive ideas. My daughter's middle school volleyball practices have been cut in half due to getting out of school so late. Last year, they were 2 hours, and this year they are down to 1 hour. A basketball league that our friends' boys participated in for many years has been completely canceled due to time constraints stemming from school time changes. Bus number 200 from Desert Ridge Middle School is a very large bus route that cannot get my child home for about 45 to 55 minutes after school gets out. Children affected by this bus route are not getting off the bus until after 5 p.m. and not walking in the door till almost 5:15 p.m. Also, the bus is getting them to school significantly late every morning. During the winter months, the sun will set around 5:05 p.m. North Albuquerque Acres, which is an area that runs both north and south of Paseo, does not have streetlights. I feel this is completely unacceptable for children to be getting off the bus and walking home in the dark. Rio Rancho Public Schools' bell schedule got me to thinking about other ways we can tackle changes with less disruption. Rio Rancho has a 4-tiered bus system with 40 minutes between start times. Their latest school gets out by 3:45 p.m. I noticed they are on a 6.5-hour day and we are on a 7-hour day. I feel it would be better if we could do a 6.5-hour day since we are also on a 4-tiered bus system that is causing a lot of issues. From what I understand, the late high school start of these changes. We could still do a late high school start on a 4-tiered bus system, but go to a 6.5-hour day. I feel that we need some kind of compromise because these changes have been too extreme and it is directly affecting our children, especially middle schoolers, in a very negative way. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is also on Zoom, Erica Davis.
Hello,
Ms. Davis,
my name is, oh.
so you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Hi, my name is Erica Davis, and I know that you said to not repeat things that previous people have said, but I would like to reiterate everything that was just said in the previous address by Nicolette. There are many moms in the exact same situation who are concerned about this time change. I also have 5 kids who have been through the APS system. One's a junior right now, one's an 8th grader, and one is a 5th grader. So I have kids in all 3 schools, elementary, middle school, and high school. And this time change is deeply affecting families, the community, and especially our middle school kids. I've done a lot of research and reading all of the research that has been done on the early high school start times. And one of the things that they encourage school boards to do is to be cautious of these changes and the ripple effects that these changes will have on the communities. And I don't know that that's been looked at extensively with this school board. Our middle school kids, like Nicolette said, are not getting home off the bus until 5:15 p.m. That's about the time that my husband gets home from work. Their school day is about as long as my husband's work day, and that is unacceptable. In a few months, like she said, the sun will be going down before the kids get home from school. This affects so many things, including their extracurricular stuff, which Nicolette already talked about. But one thing that I am concerned about is that my child is coming home without any homework, which I always thought would be the best thing ever if I didn't have to work on homework with my middle schooler. However, as my middle schooler transitions into high school, I worry about how he is going to transition into his high school years, having not had any preparation beforehand with homework in his middle school years. Also, that was mentioned before, the basketball leagues that my kids participated in for years are no longer being able to have their basketball league because there's time constraints there. This time change is affecting so many, but especially those middle schoolers and families that have kids in all three schools, the elementary school, middle school, and high school. And I invite you guys to relook at this and reconsider changing some of these times up and consider some of the ideas that Nicolette presented you with the bus schedules. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Rachel Woodard. We can see you. We can't hear you yet. There you go.
Hi.
Hi, you'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking, okay?
Okay, thank you. Esteemed board members and Superintendent Elder. In 2016, when I was an ELD teacher at Highland, Mr. Harris helped me initiate the newcomer program that is thriving today. It has since expanded the number of sheltered classes offered to newcomer Real students, and they still have the ELD level 1-2 classes separate from the more advanced ELD students. Highland also still offers impact class to Real. It's been successful, as I'm sure you know, and Del Norte has also started a newcomer program. I recently learned that the newcomer program at La Mesa buses Real from all over the district to that school. Why do we not have the same level of equity for our high school or middle school students? I'm an ELD teacher at Highland High School, or at Albuquerque High School, and our Real students continue to have their levels of support cut. As of last year, admin cut impact class, and this year, admin cut the separate level 1-2 ELD class. So now Real students are in every class with their much more English proficient peers getting no targeted support. Admin has promised PD from the LCE, but I assure you this will not make the impact needed, and none of the guardrails will be met for Real at AHS or other schools in the district this year. I have heard my admin and the new director of the LCE compare teaching Real in general ed classes to the same thing as teaching as a teacher, having to differentiate for a student with a 7th and a 10th grade reading level, or a teacher to differentiate for a newly exited ELD student in a general ELA class. They just don't understand. I've been working with Rael for 11 years, and I'm working on my dissertation, which focuses on Rael, and let me tell you, these are uninformed and frankly laughable comparisons to make. We need a centralized program or school for a middle school and high school Rael where all teachers and administrators understand and are able to cater to their unique needs. Otherwise, there will continue to be a great disparity in their education based on where they are lucky enough to live and attend school. Please, Superintendent Elder, leave APS with an equitable way to support Rael students with a centralized program for middle and high school students, all students in APS, so that students at AHS and other schools in the district can be served well too. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next speaker should be Century McCoy, and should be on Zoom. And we may have lost him. So let's move on. Gail Stewart is our next speaker. Gail, you there?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
You're fine. Okay, you'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Thank you so much. I signed up to speak about English learners and special education eligibility because it seemed like that was being touched on in some of the guardrails, and there was a mention of a study conducted by the special education department during the past school year concerning possible over-identification for special education. And I just wanted to tell you all that I have been working with families of students with disabilities who receive special education for more than 20 years. And I have never received a call from anybody saying that their concern was over-identification. The concern typically is misidentification, failure to be able to get eligibility and identification, but over-identification is not a concern. The other thing is, I just wanted to explain, and I think I may have talked about this before, but I feel that over-identification of English learners is in part the wrong question, because the question potentially is that English learners are over-identified in this district based on the district's practices for identification of EL, which historically have been have the family fill out the questionnaire, skip the interview phase entirely, and on the basis of the questionnaire, identify the child as EL. Once the child's in EL, they have to test out through the access test. Access testing is 70% weighted on reading and writing. If a child is dyslexic or needs structured literacy, they're not getting in an ELD class, and they cannot test out because they can never perform high enough on the access test. That is a reason why families opt out of ELD oftentimes is the student actually speaks English. That was always their language. They were misidentified as EL, and they're not getting the reading help that they need. So the board needs to understand how that access test works. Kids who are dyslexic and are not receiving special education services are never going to be able to test out of the access test because of the weighted nature of reading and writing on that test. And this is a problem that the U.S. Department of Ed recognized in 2015, and it stems from a historic misperception by school districts that kids can only be one or the other, either EL or special ed. Wrong. And U.S. Department of Ed said that in 2015 and warned school districts they needed to start educating people about dual eligibility.
Mr. I'm sorry, I need to stop you. You're over your 2 minutes. Can you please wrap up in a very quick sentence?
Just an issue I wanted to remind the district and the school board of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is on Zoom, and it's Margaret Luke.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Hi, my name is Margaret Luke, and I have two sons that have already graduated from APS. And I have two children who are currently attending in middle school and high school. I'm also a former teacher in APS. And so I wanted to come to the school board today to express my discontent with the school calendar for this year. And I'm hoping that changes can be made that will be more family friendly next year. The current calendar has too many weeks that are broken into what I view as useless pieces. For example, in the month of October, we have 2 weeks that are back to back that are short weeks. And I'm wondering why that wasn't consolidated into one useful week for families so that they could travel if they have the means to do that, or else a camps that could be, children could be enrolled in for parents that work. It's a beautiful time of year that students could enjoy the outdoors, as opposed to the 2-week spring break that was created this year during the month of March, which is notoriously ugly and windy as far as weather is concerned here in Albuquerque. These short weeks also occur in November and January, and I feel that they're very disruptive to the educational process in the classroom. I also believe that the calendar is not family friendly. I'm wondering why there's so many professional days for K through 8, but there aren't for high school. And I believe this is going to lead to absenteeism, especially during the short weeks of school. I believe that the school year should end before Memorial Day weekend. Dragging back families after a 4-day long weekend, at least 4 days for K through 8 and 3 for high school, is unfair, especially to high school families that are subject to a final schedule. I again believe that absenteeism will be high among the K through 8 families if they don't have a high school student. I feel that I looked at the Santa Fe schools calendar, and I believe they've done an excellent job of implementing the additional instructional minutes devised by the governor by extending the school day slightly without adding days to the calendar. They were also able to implement later start times for students.
Ms. Luke, I have to stop you. I'm sorry, you're over your 2 minutes. I need you to wrap up in a quick sentence, please.
Okay, my final thought is just, I do applaud the later start times. I feel that that's beneficial for my students, but I do hope that they could consolidate maybe to 8:30 and 9 o'clock instead of the more staggered time that we have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, and we have Century McCoy back. Century, are you there, Century?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Okay, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm a parent to a first grader that is in special needs class there at Pajarito Elementary. Upon the start of the year, we found out that there is no teacher available. We have no substitute teacher. Nobody with certification for teaching in that class. We only have 2 educational assistants in there. I've talked to the special education director. I've talked to the principal. Everyone's kind of just giving the same answer that they are doing their best, which I understand, but I feel it's not good enough. And especially for our children with special needs, I know for myself, my daughter regresses fast, and, waiting who knows how long for my child to get an appropriate education is pretty detrimental, not only for my child, but for all the special needs children that are going without a teacher. Can we look into this situation? Is there anything else that we can further do? My daughter deserves a teacher. She deserves an education. And, I just really hope that we can put our minds together and really figure out something. I appreciate your guys' time.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is in person, Ruth Porta. How are you? You'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Good evening, President Montoya Cordova, members of the board, and Superintendent Elder. I'm Ruth Porta, the Vice President of the New Mexico Childcare and Education Association. In behalf of the association, I want to thank you all of you for listening. That gives us hope that your best interest is your students and the community. I'm also I'm being involved with the APS early childhood director, Alison Gabaldon. We're building relationships, and I'm looking forward to be part of the APS Early Childhood Task Force. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jennifer DeGraff. You'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Good evening. This seems like for so many Albuquerque stakeholders, it can be like the beginning of the year, which kind of can add to our stress. And I wanted to always start by saying thank you. For everybody that might be online or that watches the video later, to our board members, to Mr. Elder, thank you for what you do. A lot of times as a former New Mexico child, I know I'm older now, I had the opportunity to speak to you guys. I don't know how many months ago it was, and I know I always end up with only 2 minutes. I left a handout, but the reason I wanted a handout to be left is because we only get 2 minutes. And when I think about guardrail number 5, that staff voice and support. When I was a kid, I knew when my adults were well. I knew when my parents were well. I knew when they were upset. It didn't matter how old I was. When I got to school, I knew if my teachers were well. I knew if they weren't. My counselors in middle school, high school, they saved me in ways that had nothing to do with academics and everything to do with emotional wellness. And so the reason that I always get so excited to talk to you guys is because I was born and bred in New Mexico. And so I will never stop attempting to go farther. Mr. Elder, I had the chance to see, of course, Mr. Ramsey, I'm not sure how familiar you are, of course, when it comes to the entire New Mexico public education area. But when I got more involved with the guardrail of staff voice and support, it reminded me that as a principal, my title didn't matter. As a leader, our titles don't matter. Your wellness matters. We are contagious in a positive way or not. And so I wanted to start by asking you to please prioritize your wellness, no matter who is listening via the podcast, via the YouTube. You know, I get confused with the new virtual world, whether it's a podcast or it's on YouTube. I always ask to start your day every day by knowing how valuable you are and the impact that you're making across our state, across your realm in the social setting, as well as in your life. And I wanted to just say thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you, ma'am. No, I appreciate it. We're on the same time. I went off at the same time. Mr. Briggs, Mr. Edgar Briggs is our next speaker. Mr. Briggs, you have 2 minutes once you begin.
Good afternoon, Superintendent and Board. First, I wanted to comment. I used to call him Scott, I was the principal. But Scott, I want to thank you, and I'm sure your family will appreciate when you come home at the end of the school year. And I appreciate all the work you've done as a middle school and high school principal and superintendent. So that was one comment. I wanted to also talk about the academic goals that will be discussed tonight. I applaud the fact that you're addressing these goals, but I do have a concern. I'd like to have the district discuss how important it is to address the educational interventions that need to be addressed at elementary and middle school. I'd compare it to dental hygiene. If you wait till they're in high school to work on teeth, you may not have teeth left. Elementary and middle school kids need to develop a work ethic and expectations for success. Specifically, as I said, Scott Elder, superintendent, I worked together with students, accountability for attaining grades. They weren't held accountable in middle school. They're promoted. And it's like a student receiving a paycheck without working. When I was at Manzano High School, the late Dr. Kruger, I would have freshmen come in and say, Mr. Briggs, why am I a freshman again? They had no concept of what it meant to earn a credit. So they were reclassified. And they said, what do you mean I'm reclassified? They need to be held accountable for that. They need to, a lot of the kids, when I went to Truman and Grant, both, and Van Buren, they would say, well, I'm going to high school now. No earned, just I'm going to high school, I'm promoted. They refer to many times as social promotion. Social promotion does not equate to success in high school. You don't earn your graduation credits by being there. when we built a community school, and I was once asked if community schools coordinate to test scores. Yes. Our numbers at Grant Middle School went double over the years. Every student in our building had academic contract. If a student had 2 Fs or below a 2.0, they met with the principal, moi, every 2 weeks in a cafeteria, and we had an Uncle Ed talk about getting grades. The students met with me every 2 weeks and were held accountable. When I went to Truman, the cafeteria was full of kids that had more than 2 Fs, no GPA, also were involved in a lot of gangs and activities negatively. When we started grade monitoring at Truman, those kids, by the end of the year, we had 15 or 20 versus a whole cafeteria full. When I came to Grant, they asked me if I'd bring that program with me. We did. We filled the cafeteria again. By the end of the year, there were 6 to 8 kids left that did not promote to high school.
Mr. Briggs, I'm sorry, you got to wrap up in one quick sentence, please.
Tim Whalen and Bob Hennig and I met, and they agreed that if I said you weren't coming, they weren't coming. And those kids would wait extra semester, go to high school, and it was amazing. They moved back with the senior class by 4 years. So I encourage you to look at what we do for academic interventions for middle school and elementary kids to prepare them to be successful in high school, not just wait for high school expectation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Briggs. Our last speaker is Gabrielle Weiner. Gabrielle.
Dear esteemed board members of APS, my name is Gabrielle Wheeler. I'm the executive director of Eastgate Kids, and I'm also a board member of the NMCC EA. I want to express my continued concerns about the 3 and 4 year olds being moved to the public school system and out of community-based programs. I want to say thank you for limiting that expansion to one site. As a member of the NMCC EA, I'd like to ask for continued partnership with community-based programs. Community-based programs are able to offer continual care throughout the year. We do not take summer breaks, and we have limited holidays and closures. We don't have extended breaks throughout the year that are not helpful for working parents who have to find alternative care. Community-based programs are play-based programs, and which extensive research has shown is best for children. Advanced countries embrace play-based learning, and their test results prove it is effective and best for the child. I also want to comment that the new bus schedule has caused us as a before and after school program to have to drop several schools because all of the schools are starting at the same time. When considering the schedule, please consider parents that have to use childcare centers for before and after care. Thank you.
Thank you. And board members, that can.
Thank you. I just want to thank everyone for who came to speak tonight. Appreciate your comments. We'll definitely heard them. I was grateful to hear some suggestions and recommendations on things that we might consider as we move forward with calendaring and just moving into this new school year. I know that it's been a shift for everyone, so I appreciate everyone's comments on that, and also just want to give gratitude and appreciation for those that also came tonight to thank us for listening and for being good partners. We are definitely doing our best, and yes, staff wellness is important, and really appreciate your comments on that for us tonight. So we're going to be moving on with our agenda. Our next item is on student outcomes focused governance. And this is, for those that all know, we've moved into a new governance model. We're focused on student outcomes and looking at ways monitoring. We're actually monitoring the goals and the guardrails that we set forth and came up with in partnership with the community and with the district. And so I'm going to turn this item over to we're going to be practicing again tonight. And I know that we do have our coach with us tonight. Ashley Paz is here with us with the Council of Great City Schools. And what we're taking up tonight is high quality curriculum and instruction. And all our presenters have moved to the front of the room. We've got Superintendent Elder, Chief of Schools, Dr. Segura, and our Chief Academic Officer, Antonio Gonzalez, and Dr. Bowman, also with our information and technology team here. So you guys have the floor. We'll get started with you, and then I think Ashley's going to probably be. Ashley, do you want to say anything before we go in? Yes. Okay. I thought you did.
Thank you. And it's great to see everyone tonight. So as a reminder, before we get started into the presentation for tonight's monitoring report, the board has an important job, and that is to first identify on the monitoring report, which you each have and have hopefully studied. You first have to identify so you have to respond to the question, are all of the elements that are required for an effective report present? So this generally happens by the board chair asking the question, does anyone have evidence that any of the elements listed for an effective monitoring report, this is the goal, the data, the interpretation, the evidence, and plan. Does anyone have evidence that any of the elements that comprise an effective report are not sufficiently present? So I wanted to start tonight by posing that question. Does anyone have any evidence to suggest that any of these elements are not sufficiently present in any three of, we can go ahead and talk about all three of them. Board members?
So one is it has to have a definition of what interim guardrail, where it clearly states what guardrail and what interim we're monitoring. Has to have, I think, at least some data, or 2 years worth of 2 data points. And what's the third one? I don't have all my notes.
Yeah, no, I'll make it easy for you. I'll just go down the list. How about that? Okay. So first, does it clearly show which specific goal or guardrail and interim goal or guardrail is being monitored?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, next, the data. Does it clearly show data for the 3 previous reporting periods, preferably on a line graph? Does it clearly show the current reporting period? And does it clearly show the target reporting periods? That's the annual targets and the deadline for the interim goal.
All but the first part.
Well,
I mean, because it says it's going to increase from like a certain point to a certain point. We know that part, but there's no data for previous years. I mean, it's a brand new goal. So, I mean, giving us some grace.
Yeah.
The first time we're not.
And this is a practice session. So
do we have?
Yeah. So so on this, it is missing the prior years. I presume that's because that data does not exist right now, because these are all new metrics that you're looking at, but we'll give the faculty or give your administration a moment to respond to that question in just a moment. So they are missing that, but we can presume why. It does clearly show the current status, and it has the years. So each year that it will be monitored is present, but it doesn't actually have those future targets shown on the line graph. So those are things that could be added, but I have a sneaking suspicion for why those are not there. So I want to keep it open for the board to lift up any other noticings on this before turning it over to the administration to respond.
I think it's unclear on, I know like on the first one, 3.1, on the evaluation, it says off track, on track. So wasn't sure what that one was. And board member Dominguez had brought that one up, because on some of the other, I think we have one that says on track, but the first 2 don't have a definition of whether it's on track or off track.
Yeah, so that's a great question. That's the next section after the data. So let's hold on to that one first. So first, let's turn it over to the administration and let them respond to the data
President Montoya Cordova, members of the board, thank you for having us here tonight. We are presenting on the three interim guardrails. We'll do them one by one, 3.1 through 3.3. Just to address some of the concerns about the data, this is the first time we ever measured this, so there is no prior year's data because we never looked. We had a sense and we have conversations, but it was not a construed measurement, so there was really nothing to compare it to. Also, as far as projecting the growth of the next 3 to 4 years, it's difficult with only one data point. You actually have to have 2 data points to have a sense of how you could develop a growth line. So then we are going to, as we get into some of the later ones, we're going to talk about how some of these growth models are going to be very, very difficult, and we'll explain why as we go through it. Finally, just as quick on the evaluation, you got the earlier draft. We had to turn this into you, pretty early, but we continued to work on it on our end. And as we're working through, for example, our strategic plan, we have a really cool tool that we can mark our progress both individually and as a district on our progress. So as we began to extrapolate the work on the strategic plan and then actually the work that's being done around these guardrails, we feel that we can pretty confidently state we're on track. But this is part of the thing about getting these materials out super early is we're sometimes kind of scrambling to get there, and so work does continue even afterwards. And so we'll do the best we can to have everything up to date, but that evaluation component may be something that you have to wait to hear in the big ta-da moment in the meetings. So but that's what we've got. So I don't really want to read the whole presentation to you, and there's not a lot on the data.
Hold on one second, Superintendent, because I want to make sure that the board is doing their job first before you go. I know you're excited to report. So his response is perfectly accurate. That is, and we've actually discussed this with this board before, that in order to draw a line, you have to have 2 points, and this works in data as well. You have to have 2 data points to know what direction your trajectory is going. So so that is a sufficient response to why the data is not present. I know, so Superintendent did respond to the interpretation or evaluation. Board Member Dominguez, would you mind stating the question that you had about that, or President, the questions that you had about the evaluation? So I want to make sure that that your question is sufficiently responded to before we get into it.
Well, I think it was answered, but how do we? Well, regarding the comment on 3.3, we're on track, or when you decide that you are on track, how will we know? What will be the data baseline, and then what will be the target? But I think, well, I'll stop there.
I feel like he answered the question.
I think so.
Because he said that they're working, we're still working with the tools. They got this to us early. The big ta-da moment would come tonight. So I think I felt like I got the answer to whether we're off track or on track, because you're going to tell us for both of those two interims.
Moving forward in the future, it'll make more sense because we'll have consecutive data points.
Okay.
And kind of see, are we making growth? Are we moving forward in a rate of growth?
We don't know yet
to make the final number.
Okay.
Yep, and that's all.
Perfectly. Has a question. Go ahead, Barb.
I just have a clarifying question about this discussion. Are we focused right now only on 3.1, or are we talking about all of them?
I think all of them.
Okay.
So
Yes. And right now you were just answering the question, do the elements literally exist on the paper? Okay, so we've addressed the goal, the data, the interpretation, and next is the evidence in the plan. So does it clearly show supporting documentation that evidences the superintendent's understanding of system performance? If you are not on target, or if the superintendent's understanding of system performance indicates implementation is not on track, does the report clearly describe systemic root causes and strategic responses and any additional next steps? And so does anyone have evidence that those things are not present?
I don't think we have evidence of root causes yet, do we? I'm proposing that we don't have evidence of root causes because we're in the preliminary stages.
Yeah, exactly. So and at this point, you're just doing practice monitoring, and it is completely acceptable that those things won't be present. But part of the practice that we're doing tonight is getting the board comfortable with understanding how to know whether the things are here or not. And so on the reports you have, so on the first page you have your goal and your data and the interpretation. And then on the following pages, it actually lays out what's going well, what's not going well. And then on the very last table is what are we going to do in the next step. So all of the elements are literally present. You won't know if they are sufficiently present until after the presentation has been given. Any questions about this part before you hear the presentation?
I just have maybe more of a board services question. So we obviously have our stuff on our computer and we have stuff printed out, but we have a whole bunch of people in the audience that cannot see the monitoring report. So are we going to be able to put what we're looking at up on the screen for people at home or for people in the audience to see what we're actually looking at?
Madam President, Board Member Jackson, we will eventually. We're not there yet. But the public should be able to click on those links on our new site and see the reports.
Okay. So as we talk about this, maybe we need to be a little more deliberate about reiterating what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Just to bring the audience along.
Yep. And so that's an excellent question, Board Member Jackson, because these reports aren't just for the board to deepen their understanding of what the progress that's being made in the district, but it's also for the community's understanding. So having the ability to see and follow along is certainly helpful. So and as we've already mentioned, this is a work in progress. This is practice. So I feel like we've identified a couple of things that we can improve moving forward. And so with that, if there are no other questions, I'll turn it over to Superintendent.
So Board President Montoya Cordova, members of the board, thank you for allowing us to present. We'll start with Guardrail 3.1. Guardrail 3 reads, the superintendent will not allow curriculum and instruction that is not district and standards aligned, challenging, culturally and linguistically responsive, and differentiated to meet the academic needs of all students. So interim Guardrail 1 addresses the percentage of classrooms using grade level high quality instructional materials. And we're proposing it'll increase from a measured amount of 30% in May of 2023 to 70% in May of 2026. The interim guardrail, the percentage was from observations done in the spring. It was data that was brought forward to us as part of our organizational diagnostic, and that is our starting point. As we look at things that are going well, and again, I guess I'm reading this to you. I didn't want to, but I guess the public, I guess I'm reading this to you. I apologize. One thing we have going on is we have an established system in place to conduct classroom walkthroughs by district-led teams, inclusive of principals, supervisors, curriculum and instruction, special education, language and cultural equity, and AVID. And the good news is we've been doing this for quite a while now. Classroom walkthroughs are not something our teachers are unaware of. It's something they've been exposed to for years. They get good feedback from them. It's great for our principals. And now we have just a slightly different twist as we have to look at some different metrics that perhaps we haven't been looking at before, including this. Also, in terms of what's going well, we have been able to increase the number of teachers on the K-5 and the 6-8 English Language Arts Adoption Committee, I believe. And we're taking increased participation input from Title I, special education, Indian education, curriculum and instruction, and language and cultural equity on the adoption process and selection. So the goal is always to increase participation, but I think more importantly, engagement. It's one thing to come to a meeting and sit in the meeting and not offer anything and leave and not doing. We're trying to really engage teachers and our educators in this work around the curriculum adoption to make sure we pick good materials. Our middle school administrations attended illustrative mathematics school leadership training during the spring semester. Illustrative mathematics is a great program. I'm very excited by what it can offer to really improve outcomes for our students in 8th grade. And so it's really important that our leadership in those schools understands how it works so that they can properly provide feedback to the people who are presenting it. Last year, each middle school participated in the Southern Regional Education Board curriculum and instruction review process, which analyzed quality instructional practices and alignment of curriculum. It happened in the spring of 2023, and it produced an exit report with recommended next steps for each individual school on an individual basis. So those are very helpful, and it's a good experience for the schools. We have continued to develop partnerships with instructionally based departments. So, for example, we are really working hard with special education and curriculum and instruction to make sure we align instructional materials so that you don't create two sets of curriculum for children who may be disabled and are not getting perhaps the general curriculum. We are also very pleased that we can report that we have high quality instructional materials for students who speak Spanish. It is true that our community is growing, and that probably is an area of growth for us in terms of developing textbooks that are in other language other than Spanish. But right now we've done quite well in English and Spanish. We have adopted high quality instructional materials for English learners K-12. And there's an increased demand for professional development, specifically pertaining to bilingual and English language development. And I think you've heard that talked about quite a bit recently. So what's not going well? So we don't currently have a system to ensure all teachers are utilizing highly qualified instructional materials consistently throughout the district. We have a system that does walkthroughs that just has to be modified, and we will then have the system to do this. We do not necessarily have a K-12 data collection tool that targets Guardrail 3.1. And that's one of our next steps, is to develop and either procure or develop that tool. It's an adaptation of what we use currently, which has also evolved over the years. Some middle school educators have reported that the year one implementation of the new illustrative mathematics curriculum has been challenging due to the rigor of the tasks and having to learn how to navigate a new resource. That's something we're going to look at how we can improve and support those teachers. And interviewed students requested more engaging instructional materials. That comes from an earlier report in the spring. And then we do need to adopt a consistent K-8 English language arts curriculum that does meet the New Mexico Public Education Department's definition of high quality instructional materials. And we have also noted there's a lack of consistent use of high quality instructional materials, specifically in small group pull-out special education classes. So this is an area of emphasis for us. Where we're going, our next steps, again, we talked about the system to ensure teachers are utilizing high quality instructional materials consistently throughout the district in English language arts and mathematics. And I want to be real clear on this, because this one is the one that sort of triggers people on both sides. It is one thing to have the materials and you have to use them. And we're really looking at tier one, that first teach. Kids need to be exposed to good materials, and for a lot of our teachers, there's lesson plans that are involved in that. There's videos, there's quizzes and exercises, assessments. It's all connected. That's great for tier one, but it's not scripted. I don't expect everybody to be exactly the same place, and teachers will always modify. Teachers will always intervene with interventions. I used the right verb there. Will intervene with interventions for students who are struggling. And that's the art and the science of teaching. So that still exists. So even though we want to make sure the materials are consistent, I do want to say it's not the robotic rote day one, you say this, day two, you say that, and hope everybody gets it. There's always going to be teachers teaching and modifying and intervening. Secondly, we have to develop or procure a tool that's aligned to the observation instrument. The tool will be used by district teams after we do a calibration process, because we have to make sure and consistent scoring occurs across classroom walkthroughs. So make sure that what I'm seeing is the same thing that someone else is seeing, and that we're consistent in our implementation. We started this work back when we started a very different type of teacher evaluation, and they were trying to calibrate us to make sure that across the state we were doing the same thing. It's difficult work, but it's meaningful and it's helpful, and it really, I think, ultimately is supportive of teachers if they're getting consistent feedback and not scattered feedback. Then again, based on that feedback, carefully design the rollout for the utilization of any new high quality instructional materials. But we have quite a bit in the district now, and we really understand the need to improve if we bring new stuff in, we understand the need to have a clear design and professional development opportunity. Establish diverse venues for student feedback around the materials they're exposed to as part of their coursework. So listening to kids and saying, is this working? What's not working? What's the problem with it? So that we can make modifications as needed with the materials. We do have to buy a K-8 English language arts curriculum that meets the New Mexico PED definition of high quality instructional materials, which will be based on a broad and comprehensive input process, including stakeholders, so that we can select and purchase these materials. This year, each high school will be reviewed by the Southern Region Educational Board Curriculum Instruction Review Team, and that will yield recommendations for next steps for them as well. Having gone through that at Highland when I was a principal, it's been a few years, but it's a really good process because you get objective feedback, and it's not about, this person or that person. It's really about what are you doing as a school? Could you improve, and what are you doing well? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And then ensure that general education classrooms and the high quality instructional materials used in those settings are mirrored in special education classrooms. So those are the steps over the next few years that we'll be working on. And that ends the report on 3.1. So we stand open for questions.
Okay, do we want to just go through each report? Is that the easiest way for us to do this? Okay.
That's up to you. So however you wish to do it.
I think we should just do that, because I think there was probably questions on each monitoring report. So thank you, Superintendent Elder, for reading all that. And I think our audience has an idea of all the stuff we're looking at, because there's a lot in that. So I'm just going to open it up. I know we all had a chance to ask questions. I think there were questions on 3.1, and I think we got some responses. I guess what I'll do is the goal is for us to ask questions that are strategic. We'll go strategic, or we want us to stay with technical first so that we could practice that, or do you want us to just practice our questions?
Yeah, so I'm sorry. I thought I misunderstood. I thought we were going to go into presenting the next interim guardrail. So this is great. So yes, the board did a wonderful job of presenting questions in advance, which you were able to do because you received the monitoring report in advance. And again, this is an ongoing continuous improvement process. So it's going to get better every single time. The questions that you asked in advance should have been tactical focused or technical focused. So these are questions that are specifically trying to understand how the data was collected, who was measured, and so the details around the technical and tactical aspects of the data collection process. And then strategic questions are more focused on how the report and the data that is collected in the report and the information that was provided both in the report and presentation are related to the goal or the guardrail. So in this instance, the guardrail. So we're going to do this the same way we did it last time. One board member will ask a question and I'll provide real-time coaching on that. So do not be afraid to misstate anything. This is a learning opportunity. So I want to make sure that everyone has grace and both that they are giving themselves grace and their colleagues. So with that, who will be the first to ask a question?
They're all like looking down, looking up. Don't want to ask a question. Barb, go ahead, Board Member Peterson.
It's probably totally inappropriately asked, but I will.
And we'll work through it.
So my technical question that I sent in, I knew that it was a technical question, was where the 30% number came from. And I felt like I got a circular answer. Was it attuned? Yes, it was attuned. So it was attuned. And how do we know it's valid? Well, it was from attuned. And I felt like that was just a circular answer. And I understand that that's not an accusation. It's the position that we're in with just launching into this. So my next step, and I'm not sure if this
can I provide a little bit of feedback on that? Because this is not the last time that will come up, maybe even tonight. So board members, when you feel as if the responses that you receive are kind of going in this circular, like just we're talking in circles. So it is acceptable to say that to your superintendent, ideally beforehand, before the session, because that ensures that he will have time to respond and make corrections before the monitoring session. But there are always going to be times when we have questions about the validity of data. It is the better way, or the best way to ask that question is not necessarily is it valid, because that's the response it's going to get. And rather than asking is it valid, instead consider asking what the degree of confidence they have in that reporting or in that number is. That opens the floor for a lot of different a lot of different ways to discuss the issue at hand. And it also doesn't, so not asking yes or no questions, and that isn't specifically a yes or no question, but it also kind of opens the floor for a yes or no question, or a simple response like that. And so that's, the response is going to be as simple as the question is. So if we ask, how do we know it's valid, or to what degree of confidence we have, that really just opens up the dialogue, and it doesn't necessarily suggest anything that could be interpreted as an accusation or suggestion that maybe it's not valid. Rather, you can discuss the degree of confidence that they have. So with that, I'll turn it back.
It leads to a level of nuance, which I think this conversation definitely needs.
Yeah.
So may I ask that question? What is your level of confidence in the data?
Okay, having never been asked that question before, I don't really know what number to throw back at you. What I'll say is this: I'm pretty confident in the number. I don't feel uncomfortable with it. Only because the agency we worked with did a good job with everything else. The community forums went well, the advisor group went well, they developed a strategic plan. There was a lot of evidence that they're doing it. What I am going to say is, if you look at the rest of the plan and our next steps, which are to develop and maintain a tool that meets these metrics through the established process that we already have done, that we know with a great deal of confidence provides valuable feedback. I think moving forward, you're going to get more data points. This number is going to change, and I don't know which way it's going to go. I suspect it's going to go up, but I don't suspect it's going to go up a huge amount this first year. But I do believe it will go up, and part of the reason is we'll see more classrooms. And the people who are doing these, it's not just one person in the classroom, it's a team of people. And so we calibrate those observations. So it's more than one person putting eyes on it. That in a classroom, if you've spent any time in a classroom, a lot of stuff's going on, and your head's kind of swiveling around, and you're seeing this kid over here, and you might not be seeing what's going on over there. And with a team, you get a more complete picture of the entire situation, the whole context. So I think as this number evolves, I feel more and more confident about it. But this is and again, remember, this is a snapshot in time. This is where we were on that day or that week, and we're moving forward. So this is a beginning point, and we'll see what happens as we go forward.
And can I just pop in real quick?
So
Board Member Peterson, just very specifically, that 30% is on page 7 of the organizational diagnostic. It's reversed where it's talking about 70% of observed classrooms. So I think that's where they got 30%, because I had a similar question. Where did the 30% come from? And I think it came from that page. So just to be very specific to what your question was, that's where the 30% came from.
It was from Attuned. So this is also probably, so Ashley, I'm going to ask for coaching to see if there's a way to ask this, because I guess I need to start from an example and then figure out how to ask a question about it.
Okay.
If I'm using a GLAD strategy, if someone walked into my classroom to see one point of my teaching that's using a GLAD strategy, you would not see grade level curriculum. You would see me developing a framework for students to understand the grade level curriculum. And so I guess in the process, I mean, I think I'm not so much worried about the number. I don't like the way it makes I don't like what it conveys of teachers not teaching. I think that is an inaccurate observation. I think it gives the wrong impression to the community of what's going on in classrooms. But I think that it's a number that still can help us develop practice, elevate practice. So I'm going to disregard the 30% in a sense, because I think the goal is, how do we help teachers? So in the development of that tool, and I'm not sure where this gets asked or how, in what framework it gets asked, and maybe it should have been asked more pointedly in my initial questions, in the questions I sent in. But it's really, what's the process and how much practitioner voice will be in the tool that continues to get developed? Because I think that there does need to be a level of nuance to see that full range of practice in a classroom. And that's why the snapshot has an element of helpfulness. But how we develop that into something more meaningful that more appropriately engages practitioners, I think is a real question. And maybe that's an appropriate question for tonight or not, but
no, there's so there are actually a couple of things here. So first of all, you you asked, you asked a couple of different questions in there that I want to lift up. So first of all, what's the process? And really it's what's the process and what is and what is it actually measuring? That is definitely so that is both a tactical question and what is asking what is the process, and then what are we truly measuring? Are we truly measuring? So we're taking a snapshot of what the of what happened on that day in time or at that period in time. And then I think so this is me kind of reading between the lines. So I need you to confirm whether this is getting to the heart of what you're asking. What can we actually learn from that snapshot that is useful in actually understanding how the high quality instructional materials are being used, or what does this tell us about the prevalence of the use of high quality instructional materials? There are a lot of different ways that can be asked, but it's all getting to this core of the same question of, this is a snapshot in time. What does it actually tell us about the systemic implementation? And so how does the data, so asking the question, how does the data that we've received, and so what can you learn from the data that we've received to inform these district-wide implementation? That actually is a strategic question, because you're getting to the heart of what the understanding is of the data and how it is being used to achieve the goal of the district, or in this case, honor the guardrail of the district. I don't know if I see head nodding, but I'd like to hear from you. Is that getting to the heart of what you're trying to understand, or do we need to talk through it some more?
No, I think that's helpful. I'm not sure that I can restate it, but I found it helpful.
Yeah, so something as simple as what can, so looking at this 30% number, what does that tell you about the systemic implementation of high quality instructional materials, and how does that, how will that improve our practices moving forward, which really is the big question for this monitoring session.
Okay, I'm gonna contemplate a little bit. I'll relinquish the floor for someone else for a minute.
Go ahead, Board Member Dominguez. Just
to build on that question, my concern is I don't want to see, and help me formulate this into a question. How will this process vary so that we are capturing the full breadth of what teachers do? What I do on Monday, what I did on Monday is probably maybe low level, but by Wednesday, it was at a higher, we were evaluating, synthesizing. So I'm at 30% on Monday, but so how will the process allow for a more complete understanding of what's happening in the classroom?
Board members, just a reminder that this particular element doesn't ask to do that. This asks us to look at the use of high quality instructional materials. The rest of the walkthroughs that we do involve exactly what you're describing. But for the purposes of this guardrail, this interim guardrail, that's not included. But the walkthrough process is not us just walking in and looking to see if the books are there and going, oh, good, the books are here and the kids have them on their desk. Check for 100%. Everybody's happy, because ultimately it comes down to you have to use them and use them well. So I'm not going to answer the previous question because I'm still not really sure what it was, but I think they play together somewhat. So I don't know if you, I did bring these people along and they are getting twitchy to answer, but I also don't want to tie us up forever. So.
Yeah, let's go ahead and hear from them.
Madam Chair and members of the board, I think, it's a process that when we're looking at high quality instructional materials, it's what is inclusive. It's not just the curriculum, the textbook. That's not at all just what it is. When we look through PED and their definition of high quality instructional materials, it's very clear that they're looking specifically at materials that are content rich, fully accessible, culturally and linguistically relevant, aligned to New Mexico standards, written with clear purpose, effective lesson plan structure, and pacing to provide the learning styles of all students that encourage inquiry and curiosity. And so that comes with form, it could be a textbook, it could be digital materials and assessments and videos, any type of interactive technologies. And so I think it's important that when we look at teachers having a strong, viable curriculum in the classroom, when as a district, we're saying that the state is vetting materials from all of these providers, they're giving us a cadre to choose from, and they are rating them. And districts have the opportunity to look and see what's going to work best for the district. And so our goal is to make sure that our teachers have everything that they need to do their job well, to feel successful, because when they do, our kids do. And with that, when we're looking for a monitoring, opportunity to go in the walkthrough process, it's that if a teachers should be scaffolding. As board member Dominguez stated, if I'm, scaffolding and introducing, something on Monday, I may not be getting to that level of rigor until Thursday. However, there are essential questions that we start lessons off with that get kids thinking critically at different higher levels. And so if teachers are using the high quality instructional materials and are collaborating with each other and lesson planning together, it's outrageous what could happen. I mean, I wish when I looked at the materials with the Odell adoption as a high school English teacher, I got, giddy about it, because if I had those materials when I was a teacher in the classroom, wow, what me and my colleagues could have done. And so that's, I think, really important to recognize, is that it's not going in and checking the box to say, yes, teachers are obeying us. It's not about that. It's about the collaboration between all of us. We are all the district. I know administrators are called the district, but teachers, staff, we are all the district, board members. And we need to create a more collaborative approach to what is happening in our classrooms. And I think that this is a really strong way to go about that. And we are really emphasizing the need for teachers to be interacting in this process at a greater depth. And they did at the high school level. And they're really excited about this, about their new HQIMs. And so I think we need to look at it as an asset versus a deficit.
Are there any other questions? I guess I was Dr. Gonzalez. Oh, Dr. Bowman wanted to say something. Okay.
All right. Yeah, I did want to just respond directly to the validity point, in that we use the data that we had, and if you can kind of what the superintendent mentioned is we are going to be creating our own process so that in the future we'll be able to answer those questions with more detail. So that's what we had.
Starting point.
It was not incongruous with what our academic folks were seeing in their less formal walkthroughs, but we will be codifying that and be able to answer gory details about the technicalities of it.
Go ahead, board member.
So that actually got to pretty directly what my question was. So can I ask a follow-up question about who and how that'll be developed?
Madam President, Member Peterson, I think right now, in response to your question, building off of the system the superintendent described at the beginning in regards to school teams going in, building the culture, district teams going in, giving feedback. We have those systems in place. Practice is known to, and practice makes perfect. And it's going to take practice for everybody to kind of get the hang of this new instrument, this new methodology, these new look-fors that we're using, because we've done this. We have that culture, we have that reciprocal communication with district and school teams. But as we do this monthly with our schools, we're going to build that capacity as we look at high quality instructional materials and grade level tasks in 3.2. So procuring that instrument is going to help us get to that next step. What I want to say is this point in time is going to really be just that. But we're going to continue the work on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis. And we have another system that's worth mentioning in the supporting of quality teaching and really working together with our partners, with our teacher partners, to be able to really look at these protocols, these systems, the way we do walkthroughs, the way we talk to each other, the way we provide the support. What's working, what's not? How can we improve? Because the left hand needs to know what the right hand is doing, and we need to support each other as we go in and look for these important look-fors, because this is the charge. This is what we want to improve upon. And with our systems, people working toward those goals, we're confident that we'll see an increase in these areas.
Thank you. I appreciate all those responses.
All right, I want to take a timeout really quick because at this point, so the questions and the conversation is very robust, but it is off track. So I want to remind you that we are looking in reverse. We're playing back the tape. We don't have crystal balls sitting in front of us. You can't monitor the future. So we really have to keep the learnings from what the data has told us into perspective for this portion of the monitoring session. Towards the end, it is appropriate at the end of the monitoring session to ask a couple of questions that are more future focused about the next steps. And this is always the challenge. So don't feel bad about it. But we do need to reorient ourselves to replaying the video versus talking about what's going to happen in the future. And with that, I want to let you know what my process is on this side. So as you're asking questions, I am recording them, and I am actually preparing a coaching document that I will send out to the board afterwards that is shared in the spirit of continuous improvement. And while I'm not giving real-time coaching to the administration, I also have some coaching notes for the administration as well. And I promise they're all positive.
Well received.
All right. Who will be the next victim? Board member.
Go. I think it's a backward-looking question. I think it's backward-looking. Okay. So in this 3.1, there was a mention of SREB, and then the data that we're looking at is for Attuned. And so my question is, looking at the data that the 30% that we're looking at, and the mention of SREB reviews, they were both looking at curriculum and instruction. Did SREB and Attuned find similar observations across the district? And did they find anything that was different? Oh, no.
So hold on before you. Don't respond to any questions until I give them coaching. So I want to lift up something. So thank you. You addressed specifically which data in the report you're referring to. And when I refer to data in the report, that can be the hard numerical data, the quantitative data, and it can also be the qualitative data, the observations, the next steps. So it's when I refer to data, I'm talking about the information included within the report. So thank you for one, pointing out exactly which information you're referring to. That's going to be helpful for your community as they watch along. And also for your staff members so that they know exactly what you're referring to. These are great practices that help you eliminate ambiguity from the conversation. So great job. Inside of the question, there was one thing. So you want to keep your questions focused on what is included in the report versus referring to asking about what is not included in the report or what is separate from the report. The assumption should always be that what is in the report is what is being reported, and anything that is not is either irrelevant or detracts from the strategies for moving forward. So great job framing the question, but we want to keep the question focused on what is actually included in the information that's being presented. So my question to you is, was there anything that wasn't included in the report that you referred to?
Well, I think the only thing that wasn't referred to was a hard number from SREB, but the fact that SREB was mentioned in the report as to a curriculum and instruction review that they have used, I feel that it is a valid set of inquiry.
That's fair. I'll allow it.
Thank you. A minus. A minus. Okay.
Member Jackson, members of the board, a couple of things to consider. The SREB review at this point is only taking place at the middle school level. Those reviews will take place this fall at the high school level. The SREB visit and the methodology used is different than the observation tool that yielded the 30%. So they weren't necessarily looking for the same thing.
Okay.
However, I think it's fair to say that there was likely some similar findings, but the interesting thing and the exciting thing, quite frankly, about the SREB reviews and the reports that were generated for each school is that they are specific to the school and they yield district-wide trends. I will give you an appetizer for next month. Several of them had to do with college and career readiness, which has to do with goal 3, and that is the topic for next month. Appetizer.
Yeah. No, it seems, and this is not a question, this is just a comment. It does seem like you have a lot of tools available to use and that they are offering up some good sets of data to be able to implement the goals and the guardrails. So I think that's really cool.
And Madam Chair and Board Member Jackson, to just be a little specific with it, the attuned diagnostic was a district-wide snapshot for all levels, where SREB curriculum reviews were school-specific snapshots for middle schools only. So yes, as Dr. Gonzalez stated, to find thematic similarities, we can do, but it wouldn't be fair to do. It's not apples to oranges.
I think I have
before you have the follow-up question, I want to, I said I wasn't going to, but I am going to celebrate your staff for a minute because they just did something really special. They didn't have, so they took what you asked, which doesn't have a specific answer, but they added clarity to why that answer doesn't exist, and they informed you of what the actual details are around it. That is an excellent job. More information is always helpful as long as it's in the spirit of deepening the understanding.
Yeah.
For us.
Yay. Yeah, I agree.
A plus. Yay, you. All right. So I think, you're done? Okay. Any other?
I mean, mine, I don't think I think it's not a good strategic question. So I'm put that out there right away. So when I'm looking at interim guardrail 3, I'm looking at the 30%, and like Member Peterson, I have a hard time believing that that's true. Having been a teacher, that's just personal. But what I'm looking for in the data is what kind of, what are the strengths in that 30%, or what are the struggles? What gaps are existing maybe between, maybe at elementary school, they are teaching more at grade level than they are at middle school or high school. And I think that's just missing here to kind of, I'm looking at that number, but I have no idea that honestly what it means when it comes to the different levels, elementary, middle school, and high school. And maybe that's not something that should be here, but right away, what I want to see is like, ooh, where are we missing? Are we missing, having grade level? Because maybe it's a certain grade level that we're really missing it, and then other grade levels are just right on. So I know that's not probably a really good question, but that's what, when I'm looking at this, I'm not really getting, that much from it besides the 30% that I personally don't believe, but that's okay.
Yeah, Peggy. So that question actually isn't as bad as you're telling yourself that it is.
Thank you.
So you did a couple of things here that were very, very good. So again, you addressed exactly which data you're referring to. And then your question, so you said a lot in there, but the question that you asked actually, so what are the strengths or the struggles that you've learned from this number? That actually is exactly what we want you to ask. What are you learning from the data that we're looking at? There's a lot in that. I want to caution board members from providing a lot of with each clarification and like justification of the question, it opens the floor for you to get off track with the monitoring session and to go down different rabbit holes and it also opens up the conversation for board members to begin giving opinions and suggesting strategies, and that's something we certainly want to avoid. But asking the question, like, what are the strengths and what are the difficulties that you've learned about this, and even going deeper, and how do we I think this has actually been asked quite a bit. So the question about how the magnitude of what has been studied, or what has the data that has been captured, I feel like that's something that has been addressed pretty thoroughly so far. But going into what are the additional the strengths that we can see in these numbers. That's excellent.
Thank you.
That was the question that I had written down. See, I have it right here. I have proof that I wrote it down.
Thank you.
So are they allowed to answer? Yes.
So I think I'll pass to my colleagues for the other question. But with respect to the breakdown between elementary, middle, and high school, the data that we had, it's more of a technical question in that the data we have available does not make that breakdown available to us. It might be something that administration looks at kind of internally for future decision making, but in this particular monitoring port, the data is not available. With respect to what we learned from the 30%, kind of broad, but I can toss it over to my folks on my left if they'd like.
Yes, that would be you.
So what did we learn from the 30%? I think specifically for this interim guardrail is, again, making sure that our teachers have the materials that they need to do what they need to do in the classroom for our kids. And we pulled it directly from the diagnostic report. So
more importantly, I think, is also the need for the professional development around the materials. So that came out in the illustrative mathematics. It's hard, it's a tough curriculum. And so we need to support teachers. So not only do we give them materials, here's a book, go forth and teach them up, but we say, here's how you can use this most effectively as well. So that's probably the areas of growth for us. And what it did with the number, if nothing else, is it made us really look at what kind of materials do we have? Why aren't they being used, if that's what's happening? And why are some people using them, apparently some success? So it created a different context to conversations that I think is useful.
I think just to build on that is more important than the number itself is it's a target. People want to know what it means. People want to know how we came to that number, and people want to know on a very human level how they can do better. So it spurred that conversation at the table at the district and school level, because help me understand what this is. Help me understand how this was measured. Help me understand how we can do better tomorrow than we did today. At a very fundamental level, I think this spurred that conversation.
Okay. Any other, do you have a question, Board Member Tucker Romero?
No, I'm not gonna ask a question for the sake of asking a question. I'm just gonna tell you, I feel like you supported everything that you said, you got to the nitty gritty of why it wasn't, and you were honest and transparent with us. And when we receive data like that, that's how we're able to move forward and actually receive the outcomes that we're looking for. So thank you.
Any other questions? I do not have a question because Peggy asked my question in relationship to this guardrail, because I had just, I had the same question, just what do we need to know about this particular data point? What were our strengths? What were the challenges with it? So I think you've answered that. So I think we can move on to the next guardrail. So we'll go on to 3.2. And before we do that, I think we have to ask the 3 questions around the evidence on this one. It's got all of those pieces that we said it would have. I think it defines it, tells us what guardrail. Is there any evidence? Any of you have any evidence that it does not meet some of the criteria?
And Superintendent, it's showing now, so we don't have to read it all.
Yeah.
Ask and you shall receive. You did it very quickly. That's great. Thank you. So
I think just on a technicality, because Ashley's probably going to say this, it doesn't have the 2 data points. It doesn't have the data from before, but we've already addressed why that is so.
Okay. And I think we were going to hear the ta-da moment in terms of on track or off track. So I think we're ready to go ahead and just have you present on the guardrail.
Very good. Well, this is guardrail 3.2, looking at the percentage of observed classrooms using grade level standard. Student work will increase from 38% in August of 2023 to 70% in May of 2026. The source was, again, the organizational diagnostic that was done in 2023. So that's where that starting number, almost 40% of classes. Just to highlight, and actually I'm glad I don't have to read this because a lot of it is tied to what we read on the first, what's going well. We already have a walkthrough system. We already have people that are trained. We already have a culture of accepting that. We've done work with the middle schools. What's a little different in this one is that our elementary school principals in this particular area. So 51 of the elementary school principals participated in a University of Washington cohort focused on providing effective teacher feedback. And this year, all elementary principals will participate in the University of Washington cohort focused on providing. This was all part of the Principal Leadership Academy that we began a year and a half ago. So this is some of the work that you have agreed to fund, and I really think you see why it's going to be valuable down the long run. We also are proud to say that the percentage of English learners who are scheduled correctly has improved over the last 6 years. So we're doing a little better in terms of getting kids in their classes that they need to be in. What's not going well, this is a big one for me, and I'm glad we included this. So back in the day, when they rolled out the Common Core state standards, we really dove into training around those things. And we did a lot, and we gave teachers opportunities to talk about it. We looked at them. There are apps you could utilize. I remember being in a training and just being amazed at what you could pull up on this new mysterious technology device, and how helpful it was. And it's overwhelming. There's a lot there. And so we did that for a few years, and then we stopped. And the assumption was, one, that everybody got it, and two, that higher ed was continuing to do that type of work. It is our understanding now that higher ed does something like that, but may not be as in-depth. And so it's a lot of what I keep referring to at the state level, and when I have these conversations, is we do a lot of reteaching and retraining and catching people up. We stopped doing this because we felt we didn't need to. And now we're beginning to wonder if maybe that's an area that we need to refocus on as far as what are the core standards, what really has to be taught. One of the things that we did during the pandemic that I think was really important is we identified what we called essential standards, recognizing that learning was going to be stunted, that online learning was going to be tough. We tried to get down to make sure they know these 5, 6, whatever is standards. I continue to advocate at the public education department that we ought to consider doing that as a state, really look at what are the key skills students need. But anyways, as far as this goes, we understand we probably need to pick up some professional development around this area. And that's a great opportunity for us to work with our practitioners, because they can really help us to understand where it needs to be picked up. And quite frankly, we have some that could probably offer the training. So we've got opportunities here. We do have to define rigorous instruction a little better. I think it's similar to other things. People know it when they see it, but they're not always sure if that's it. So Barbara got it. Anyway, so our students again requested more challenging instructional tasks, which we thought was interesting. We are seeing a number of increased opt-outs for the English language development services. You did hear a potential explanation for that today in public forum. There is, I believe, inconsistent understanding of the difference between bilingual and English language development services, because they are not the same, and people do get them confused. And then when we launched Tutor, it was pretty soft. It was a soft launch, and we really do better with paper moving forward. So when you look at our next steps, there will be an RFP to be awarded for the development around what's excellent instruction for English language arts, what's same in mathematics, and the development of a district-wide instructional framework. And then really super important, scopes and sequences, units of study. So for years we had those, and then they sort of disappeared into, I don't know, the ether. It is my understanding that we have found them again, but they're a little out of date. They need to be re-upped. So I believe this is the work that's going to be done in the strengthening quality in teaching, the work with the teachers, and that's where our practitioners are really going to have an opportunity to engage in this really important work. I really think if we had consistent scope and sequence across the district, it would help us dramatically, because teachers would understand I need to get from point A to point X, Z by the end of the year, and here's the pattern and timing of those sort of things. So that's what it works. Would everybody be exactly on it? No, because again, you have to modify, but you understand where you got to get. Using this newly developed district definition for rigorous instruction as a guide for future professional development to improve student outcomes. This next year, first and second year principals will participate in standards-based instruction professional development to support challenging grade level instructional tasks. So again, helping our leaders, the people who are supposed to be the primary teachers in the schools, help their and support their teachers well by understanding what they can do. Try to develop a system to decrease the number of opt-outs if that's needed. And then I think, again, we talked about it, providing clarity to teachers to better understand the difference between bilingual and English language development, a much more complete implementation of the paper tutoring program for students in grades 3-12, and then complete those reviews at the high school level. So those are what we stand on Guardrail 3.2, and we're open for questions.
Okay. Ashley, do you want to say anything before we go to questions?
Nope. Whoever is ready to go first can go on.
So, Board Member Tapia Romero, do you want to ask a question? No? Okay. Does that don't have a question? Board Member Peterson, you have a question, I can tell.
I always have questions, and and one thing I have to say, and this is actually and I appreciate it, statement that this really is dense. And so every time I've read it, something else has jumped out at me of, ooh, I wish I had paid attention to that earlier. So this is a question that should have been a technical question earlier on. But I'll go ahead and ask it since I've got it. In regards to the very first step of what are we going to do next, and the request for proposal, how can that align with the work that's been done previously by teachers and by knowledgeable staff in the district to really look at the standards, align them with practice, deepen understanding to be able to actually use them effectively in classroom instruction? What's that alignment that can exist that'll include practitioner voice along with the RFP?
Board Member Peterson, members of the board, you've essentially described the first agenda of our first convening of the supporting quality teaching meeting, which is taking place in a couple of weeks. We are taking out the units of study that are, we acknowledge, outdated, that need to be updated in the different areas that will inform the request for the RFP to be able to move forward accordingly. But we hope to do that in collaboration, and we are under no illusions that it will be quick work. It will be deliberate, intentional work. But we recognize it as an area of need for us to move forward to hit the mark in this specific guardrail over time.
So Ashley, should I have modified that in some way that would have made it a better question?
So that actually is, I would say that is a strategic question. You are not asking about the you're not asking about understanding the data. You're not asking who is measured. You're actually referring to one of the strategies that they have addressed. So that is completely appropriate. My only feedback is that I would try to focus it backwards. So go back to which is hard to do when you're talking about next steps. But it's also not entirely forward-looking because you're talking about the work that has already been done. So I would just flip the question around. So what do we know about, or so what do we know about work that has previously been done by the educational experts in our district, the teachers, the principals, all of the people, and how can the RFP that you have lined out in the first step moving forward be aligned with that? That was a great job.
Amazing. Thank you for the answer too.
Any other questions? I have a question. Can I go ahead since I didn't? I was like, I think for me, it's on what's not going well, and you've mentioned the English language development services and the opt-outs. And so for me, it was like, what more do we know about these students that are mentioned in the report? So because we say it's not going well, it's something we have to work on. So I just wanted to know, what do we know more about that?
Sorry, what do we know about those students?
Yeah, the opt-out. I mean, so we know what's
Anything?
for me, I'm trying to understand what it means to have them opt out and what the challenges are on those for those students. What does it mean for them?
It means that they have chosen to not take advantage of the development classes. And they'll go into just general education classes. And sometimes it may be a family that has a family member at home who speaks a second language and sort of, cavalierly writes that on their registration form. Oh, this is Spanish is spoken at home, and because it is, but the child may not really be deeply engaged in that language, and so they get identified because it's on the registration card. So they may choose to opt out of those services, saying we really don't feel we need those. Now, I think there's others who they have other reasons for opting out, but I'm speaking only anecdotally here, and I'm a little out of date because this has been since I was a principal, and we had the same issue then. I just had families who, for example, a Native American family might become identified because of perhaps the assessment, but they don't really feel they need English language development, and so they'll step out and they'll go into a general education class and maybe struggle, but oftentimes they do fine as well. So
I guess my question was really more around, but what do we know about them in terms of just as a subgroup? I mean, are they graduating on time? Are they struggling? That's the part, or we don't have data on that.
I would suspect that we do have data on that. And if we'd had opportunity to think about it beforehand, we probably could have brought that, but it's something we'll have to look into. My gut is we don't have it readily available. We could just jump on SAPR and pull it up.
So Ashley, feedback?
Yes. So this is kind of bordering on the coaching that I shared with Courtney earlier about things that are not included on the report. But it's borderline because this is something that is it is part of the growth. It is part of the growth that every single district that begins progress monitoring has to go through. And that is finding the balance of how much information to include in the report. And so the coaching that your staff has received is to keep it clear and concise. And so part of the give and take that happens prior to the meeting is when there are when there are pieces of information included like this, where there could be additional information or where the board could benefit from having more detail, that's a great place to have those conversations before the board meeting, because that leads to more robust conversations during the board meeting.
Fair enough.
Yep. And that's, I mean, so for the purposes of tonight, this is perfect. This is actually a great conversation.
Any other questions? Board Member Dominguez looks like she wants to ask a question.
And it has to do with the bullet point just below the opt-outs, the discussion we just had. And I'm trying to formulate the question, so the bullet point reads, provide clarity to teachers to better understand the difference between bilingual and English language development services. And so, how has this been a problem that we are trying to, how has this impacted bilingual and English language development students that we are placing it on next steps?
Well,
So is that-
wonder if Ashley's gonna give
Is
us.
that, is,
Yeah, so this is actually a great, like, even carrying on from previous conversation with President Montoya Cordova. So navigating the full report. So you have the section that's titled, so it's on page 3, what's not.
what are we going to do next step?
Something just happened with my sound. Can you hear me okay?
Now we can, yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So on the what is not going well portion, the second to last bullet point is that they acknowledge that there is an inconsistent understanding of the difference between bilingual and English language development services. So that was the area where they said this is not working. And and then this bullet point that you referred to, Board Member Dominguez, is specifically what they're going to do about it. So provide clarity to teachers to better understand the difference between bilingual and English language development services. So that is a direct, here's what's not working, here's how we're going to address it. So their question was, is this a problem? So it's something that they identified as a problem in the or as what's not working. So is there something else that you're trying to understand?
Well, I'm trying to recapture it. I ended up asking a how.
Okay.
question.
Is it proper to ask how do they plan to provide that clarity?
Yes.
So do they have, or what strategies might be utilized in providing that clarity? Is that what you're trying to understand?
She said yes.
Okay, perfect. Then that's it.
So you get to answer.
Waiting for the cue. Member Dominguez, members of the board, we appreciate the conversation because it helps us also recognize the need for us to perhaps be clearer in the bullet. So we're communicating what it is we mean. Essentially, what I think it boils down to is including families in the bullet. So not only teachers, but families. So I think that's a clarity point that's absolutely well taken. The other thing that I'd like to lend to the conversation is the notion of coordination of services. So when you have an ELD student, for example, they receive a level based on their access score, which puts them in a course. That student may or may not be enrolled in a bilingual program around enrichment of the curriculum. So that really is an important distinction to really look at from a class schedule placement point of view, as well as a support to the student as they receive instruction within the context of their class schedule. So that's a distinction that's really important. Oftentimes you have students who may be receiving ELD in dual language programs. That's not a hard and fast rule. It's not always the case. So really helping our teachers, our parents understand the distinction, the opportunity to grow in a second language and acquire proficiency in that second language. There's some counseling and some support that I think we as a district can lend to both groups, the parents and the teachers, around really specifically supporting that student.
It leaves us with a lot more questions. I know for me, it does, that's a learning piece. It has nothing to do with this report.
It's
yeah.
good to hear that family, that you recognize that family and instructors, educators.
It's definitely an approach
Mm-hmm.
to the curriculum.
And placement.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Mueller-Aragon, you look like you have a question.
I think so. So let me see how I can ask this question though. So I'm looking at the paper tutoring program. And so so I kind of want to understand what other strategies are in place that you have in place to overcome maybe the challenges that came with that inconsistent launch of paper. Besides, I think you said complete implementation, but do you have other strategies?
Yes.
Madam Chair and Board Member Mueller-Aragon, when we say soft and inconsistent launch, it was because we had to navigate SB 128, and that has to do with background checks. And so we had to work with paper to have them do all their tutors conduct 3,000 APS background checks. That took a lot of time because of House Bill 128. I mean, Senate Bill 128. So when we look at that, it was a slow and soft launch because of the logistical pieces. But now kids and teachers have access to it. But they got access to it at the end of last school year, which was just not ideal whatsoever. However, now schools and teachers are being trained on how to utilize it. And we are hearing a lot of positive feedback from teachers and principals regarding how they're utilizing it in their classroom, how English teachers and history teachers are having their students submit their writing samples for a first review through the tutor, the paper review process. It's turned around within 24 hours to students. So it minimizes the work of teachers having to go line by line for 160 essays, which gives students that immediate feedback, which is really helpful. They also have math missions, which are different engaging math activities for grade level that can be utilized. And teachers are utilizing that small group setting in their classroom so kids can then ask those questions. We're seeing a greater impact at the middle school level right now, which is really exciting because that's where we see a lot of disengagement. So right now we're launching. People are trained or in the process of being trained, and it's being utilized. So it's really exciting. Today, last year it was a struggle.
Okay, I see Ashley smiling, so I don't think she's got any. That was a great.
Oh, yeah. So I was just gonna add. So this question is very similar to the question that Board Member Dominguez asked. It was phrased differently, but it was getting to the heart of the same thing. So there was an identified what's not going well, and then there was a direct response to what are we going to do about it. And what really the question that you asked, Board Member Mueller-Aragon, is how? What are the actual strategies that are going to be used? So again, this is just another example of providing additional depth, either in writing on the report or through the verbal presentation that's delivered.
Great. questions? I think you're asked out.
Well, I mean, I'm like Board Member Tapia Romero. I feel like between what you guys presented to us and the answers to the questions that we sent in prior, I mean, I feel as though you understand what the issue is and you understand how to move forward. So if I have other questions, I'll email you. But I'm impressed. I mean, I'm impressed with this presentation.
Yeah. I'm in the same spot. I don't have any questions, any further questions. So any other further questions from anybody else? Are we good? I think we can move on to the next guardrail. So the next one is 3.3. Same questions, any evidence folks have, I think, other than the original ones that we had, right? I mean, it's clear, we know what it is. This is the one on the percentage of classroom teachers rated as innovating in their use of differentiation techniques will increase from 40% to 70%. We've got a timeline. This one says it's on track, and we've got one data point. And that's where we are. So any other questions or concerns so far on that part? So if not, we could just go on to the presentation. So I think we'll just move into the presentation.
Madam President, members of the board. So we come to interim guardrail 3.3, the one that makes us the most nervous. And I want to explain why. So in Elevate New Mexico, the evaluation system for teachers, there are 4 tiers that a teacher can be rated at. The level 1 would be not demonstrating. 2 would be developing. 3rd is applying. And then the highest rating is innovating. So what we're shooting for here is that we're going to see a significant increase in teachers being rated as innovative teachers. If you were to do a bell curve, it would say that 70% is not possible. That's just not how it normally works. But the goal here is to try to really support teachers so that they can become great teachers. Good. And anyway, so that's where we're a little nervous about the number. See that, right? What do you want me to read? Right. So specific to this one, as we get to what we're talking about, is that it's the percentage of classroom teachers rated as innovating in their use of differentiation techniques. So it's not their overall super scores, but specific to differentiation techniques. And that will increase from 40% to 70%. This is why it makes us nervous. This is one of the hardest things to do. It's tough to differentiate. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes kids make it easy and you can create little groups and it just finds out perfectly, but it doesn't always. And so this is a tricky one, but we're interested in seeing where it goes. And it's something that we measure already. So that was why it was selected, and it gives us an interesting snapshot. So when you look at what we're doing well, obviously that the tool has already been utilized within the district with Fidelity, and there's ongoing training opportunities, ongoing for evaluators around calibration and making sure it's consistently used. All principals have been trained in the Cotter change model. I think the key element here is that we need to create a sense of urgency, and that it is about forming coalitions. It's not about going out and catching people. It's about forming coalitions to make sure we provide the support and empower employees for action so that we can have some wins. And then trying to consolidate those gains and strengthening change by anchoring this in the culture. It's going to be hard, but it's a really good place to think about how we help people and support them. Again, we purchased materials. We are looking at purchasing iStation, or we have purchased iStation already, personalized instruction for all students who are performing below grade level. There are 23 middle schools that will participate in Lexia Power Up, which is a literacy intervention that they can use during their Tier 1 instruction. And again, we know that newly enrolled students to the district are assessed for English language fluency within 30 days of registration. And then students in dual language programs are assessed with the STAMP assessment, measuring reading, writing, speaking, and oral fluency. Things to improve. So we have provided training around tier 2 interventions, but I don't think we have a toolbox that we could point to our teachers and say, these are the most effective to use. And so the ones who are good at it, they've got good tier 2 instruction interventions, and the people who struggle don't, and there's no real way for those groups to come together and build that. So that's something we've got to work on. We do see that whole group instruction remains the primary modality of instruction. Look, there's a time and a place for lecture. That's nothing wrong with it, but it can't just be all day long, all period long. There's got to be mixture. And we know that these young kids, especially this generation alpha that's coming up, and they don't have the attention span that they used to. And you can't just talk to them all day and expect them to be little vessels and filled up. You've got to have activity. You've got to have movement. You've got to have things for them to do. And you know what I see, I was out at a school today, an elementary school, and it was so much fun because they're still learning, this is how we do school. And I was in some of the earlier grades, and the kids got real excited when I came in. They had no idea who I was, but they knew I had a tie on, so I had to be somebody. And they started to get real twitchy, and the teachers had to do little redirective, to get them back and focused. And the ones that were really good at it, it was so much fun to see them do it because these kids responded so quickly. And there was a couple classrooms, I thought, man, we haven't even been here 2 weeks and they've got them, they've got it. And this is good. It was really good. But we need to make sure that that's happening across the way, and that we get out of that whole group instruction. And then we do have a concern about the SAT process, which continues to yield a high number of students being placed into special education services. What SAT really should do is provide a series of interventions for kids to try to keep them out of special education, to try to figure out a way to improve them, and not, special education really needs to be the last resort. And so we're trying to work on that. Again, so what we're going to do next, really looking at how do we adopt some district-wide tier 2 interventions that we can point to and say, these are good, and provide support for teachers to learn how to use them. We are establishing a cross-departmental plan for support and professional development around differentiated instruction. It can't just be special education trying to help us. It's got to be curriculum instruction. There's going to be some stuff from language and cultural equity, because interventions for our language speakers may be different than interventions for struggling readers. And so there's got to be this cross-departmental work. And then continued training and support for personnel involved in the student assistance team. Again, we're trying to avoid the over-identification of students for special education and make sure that those students are in there, really need to be in there and get the support they need, and hopefully ultimately get out. The problem with special education is it's all too often it's a life sentence, and maybe it doesn't need to be. So, and I have seen programs where kids got out and it's been okay. So I think that's what we're trying to get to. So that's 3.3, we stand for questions.
Okay. We'll open it up. Who wants to be brave to ask the first question?
I actually do have a question.
Crystal, Board Member Tapi Romero, go for it.
And Ashley's probably gonna.
She's there. She's ready to pounce.
We're good. So it was back to when you started talking about the 4 different levels, with innovating being at the highest level.
Right.
I didn't know we had the 4 different ones, so just bear with me. And I know we're trying to get them at the highest. Do you see the majority at 1, 2, or 3? Because obviously we're not at 4. Where are the majority of them, of our teachers? Where are we ranking? Is that a fair question, Ashley? Just keep nodding. Say yes.
That is a perfect question.
Majority of our teachers sit in 3.
Okay.
With you saw a percentage of 40 right now, and so most of our teachers are doing a good job. Okay. It's the ones that we don't see much of are 2 and 3, but it's tricky to move from 3 to 4. There's just a lot it's a lot harder the way the evaluation is established. But again, as Chanel or Dr. Skura reminded me, we're really just looking at that one element, differentiation, which should make it a little easier on our instructors. So there's not just your whole life is, it's can I be rated around differentiation and can I improve there? But most of our instructors are in that 3 and 4.
You ask him. Could you tell us again what 1 is, what 2 is?
Yeah, you can certainly always look up on Elevate New Mexico.
Yeah.
You like and see the tiers, but there's not demonstrating There's developing,
That was it.
there's applying, and then there's innovating. And we can provide you, examples of what we look for, what the state asks us to look for in these elements.
Wait, before Ashley, do you want anything to add to that, or can we move to our next question?
Nope, we can move on.
All right, Board Member Peterson, looks like you have a question.
Oh, I just have to say, set our sights high. I remember Brad Allison saying that we were going to get 100% of our children above the 50th percentile. So there you go. So my question, so I actually do have a question. I just couldn't resist. So what obstacles are being encountered with professional time in being able to pull? I mean, I think the next steps are very appropriate and right on. I mean, I'm excited to see, and as we get into it more, I'm hoping that it'll be interesting to see how, for instance, the conversation around root causes develops and gets intertwined with this as we get into the work more. And I'm looking forward to that. But right now, in terms of really looking at the challenges that we may or may not have, what you are seeing over, I'll try to look backwards over the last, beginning implementation at the end of last year, now looking at this year, what's happening with everything from schedule to class load to all of those things.
So before he answers, I just want to say again, well done. And it was backward facing before you even put a time frame on. So good job.
So I think what we're going to struggle with is the time. And you mentioned the schedule. So earlier tonight in public forum, it came up that the high school schedule doesn't seem to have as much professional development as the elementary level. Well, the reason for that is in the high school schedule, they have built-in PD, they have a PLC, right? So they didn't require as many hours outside of the school day, but the elementaries did. So we're going to have to be pretty thoughtful in our use of that time. And honestly, we won't get to everything this year. This is a 5-year plan. It's going to take some time. But these are elements that we're identifying and recognizing as we have to start sequencing out what gets the priority now, and then what gets priority next year. And again, how do you maintain that training over time? It can't be just one time. Okay, now you know how to differentiate. Bye. We're going to have to follow up and make sure that people have access to materials. Now, one of the cool things that we have now, of course, is all this technology and all this video technology. And, I'm actually taking a course on conservatorship. I'm having to take care of a family member, and all my training's online. And where I'm really thankful is when I have to start filling out the forms, actually, I can go back and look and see what I have forgotten, make sure I don't miss something. I know teachers don't have a tremendous amount of time to do that, but at least I'm hoping we'll be able to provide options for them so that if they do need to go back and look, those options will be available to them much more easily than go back and look at what notes you took that one day. But it's going to take some collaboration with our people to try to figure out how to do it. And again, I am 100% convinced, because I have seen it. I have people in this district that can teach us. I don't always need to go outside and hire someone. We talked about the RFP earlier for help with those visions of excellence and those scope and sequences. We could do it. We just don't have the time and the people. We need somebody to come in and guide those groups and help them work through it. Because we're doing all this other stuff. So that's what we're trying to be real careful with, how we use our PD time and our PD money, So we can make sure we can support some of the initiatives and then we bring in help when we need it.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question?
I have a
Oh,
question.
go ahead.
I think this is a just help me to understand question. So what would that be? Tactical, I think. Tactical. So this, looking at the data, the 40% of our classroom teachers right now are rated innovating.
In terms of differentiation.
Specifically in terms, okay, that was my follow-up question. So 40% specifically in terms of differentiation. Okay. And so what you guys are hoping to move the needle on is that tier 2 instruction, which is specifically the differentiation aspect. Okay.
It would also include the ability to intervene at tier 1 as well, so that they don't have to go into, because tier 2 interventions they're more personal. They're very, they can be pretty stringent, and tier 1, where you can gently correct a problem delicately and quickly. Again, that's sort of the art of teaching, where a kid's struggling to understand and you work with them for 3 minutes and oh, I get it now. That was an intervention. That's differentiating because you taught him a little differently, and it's up to us to notice that.
Okay. I think I'm seeing the totality of the guardrails of how you've set these up. And that's not a question, a statement, I know, but I appreciate it because now I'm seeing the totality of you're starting with tier 1 with the instructional material, then you're going to the schoolwork, and then you're going to the differentiation, and those combined will move the needle is what you're looking for. Okay.
Well, that actually goes back to the question I think that was asked earlier. So, well, what does this element show me? Well, that element shows you that element. But when you're done looking at all 3 elements, you've got a much more comprehensive picture of what's actually going on. But we were told that the guardrail had to be specific to a point, which is fine, because otherwise this conversation, which is difficult already, would just be that much more difficult, and we would swim around on, because I got all sorts of jargon, and we can train you up if you want, but this way it's much more concise, I think, and clear for us in terms of how we report to you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I wrote down, you have Cotter, you have Elevate, you have SREB, you have STAMP, you have MLSS, you have the University of Washington, you have all of so many tools in your toolbox. So I appreciate that you're focusing in on specific tasks that will move the needle forward. Just one other question, if it's okay. I think we're to this point. Does anybody else have any questions, or can I ask this question?
Go ahead.
It's a future looking question, but are there any changes that you anticipate coming up in the future through any budget recommendations that you have, or any policy changes that you foresee coming to the board with? Like, will there be any budget implications or policy recommendations based on these changes?
Well, so that's a good future question. Obviously, budgetarily, it's going to get tricky because, for example, our principal academy is fully funded by ESSER. That goes away. We'll continue to have principal meetings, and we'll continue to work with them, and we'll try to build off the work that's been presented to us from these outside agencies that have come in. And right now we've got a cadre of principals that are getting really good training. I think it will be advocacy at the state, because they're trying to start their own principal leadership academy, and they're doing fine, but they need some direction, and we may end up helping, or at least offering to provide some thoughts on that. We may need to review the policy around the identification of, second language speakers. Maybe there's some maybe there's some ways we could get to a point where parents didn't feel they had to opt out, that they hadn't been misidentified. And when it gets to instructional materials, they don't fund us for well enough. They just don't. And it's year after year after year. And that adds up. And so we're always short the materials. And part of that is, so what do? Do you buy the materials for everybody and you have to cut back on the PD? Or do you buy the materials for some of the people and they get the PD, but the other people are stuck in the old books, right? And then you try to catch it up. So that's the balance. And that's something that will come up in the future for you all to discuss and decide how, whatever future administration brings forward a plan, that's kind of what they're going to be talking about. I think they're going to be looking for, what do you want us to fund? So.
And just to clarify, they mean the state? The
No,
state
I
doesn't,
mean,
who doesn't adequately fund?
The state does not adequately fund instruction materials. What they do is they put it in the SEG. Now, I think you saw the list this past year of all the items that got included in the SEG. And they said, we funded it properly. We funded it properly. And in many cases they did. But I start to run into issues. For example, the menstrual products were put into the SEG. You have to pay menstrual products. Okay. Well, you estimate a cost on that, right? So what happens when you run out of products? Is if you estimate it under, okay. We had some concerns about the funding for the EAs and whether or not they really adequately loaded that. We don't believe they did. And the problem with these funding formulas is they just keep sticking it into one general fund. And so it's real hard to say, well, there was this much, and they'll tell you, well, you should have this much for instructional materials. Okay, we can pull that much for instructional materials, but that might have an impact on other areas because it's not line by line by line. I would prefer that they say, here's your instructional material money separate from the SEG, and here's your money for this separate, but that's just a preference.
It sounds like they need to be more innovative in their differentiation.
I mean, there's elements that, and honestly, the funding this year was much better than it has been in the past. I don't want to sound like I'm just slapping away at people, but it's just been a long time that we've been short funded on materials. I was a classroom teacher in the 90s and people tell me, we don't have enough money for materials. Wow, how can that be?
And it just kind of adds up each year. It just sort of becomes, it's kind of like when we look at children and, gaps, the gap just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So.
Can I wrap it up with one final?
Sure.
There. And it kind of goes back to the little motto we learned in our session a while back where it says, like, with your hard work and our support, overall, like, what can the board help support you in the next steps? What do you need from us?
Dr. Bowman.
I think we've been asked that before. I think patience is probably a big one here. Because like I said, this is a 5-year plan, and you guys, no offense, tend to want everything next week. And I do appreciate the urgency, and we have to have a sense of urgency. We can't keep twiddling our thumbs and saying, well, we just can't do it. We can do it. And I think this district will do it over the next few years. And I do think you're going to start seeing changes. We've put in the infrastructure, but you've got to give us time to show that and collect, more data. These data points will shift after this year, and we'll see which way. And be patient when we have a step back, perhaps, because maybe we did something wrong or it just didn't work as well, or we thought the training was brilliant and the people who took the training had a different opinion, so we'll see.
Thank you.
I just have something that just kind of popped into my head. So when I was looking at, these numbers, do you see anywhere or have data that shows that there's like a higher level of the use of innovative differentiation techniques in like dual language classrooms?
We could look at it, but we aren't currently. We couldn't pull that up.
It'd be interesting to know. I would just just myself think that might be something you see. Thank you.
Board Member Dominguez.
I have a question regarding the last bullet points under what is not going well and what are we going to do, next steps, in reference to over-identification of students in special ed. And the question is, so what system or systems, strategies have been in place that you will correct to avoid over-identification? It lists here continued training and support, but if you could elaborate a little bit.
So when you look at the use of the SAT model, there's two groups that traditionally are trying to push, I think, towards special ed. Sometimes it's parents. They get very concerned about their child's performance, see them falling behind, and see special education as sort of a way to solve a lot of their problems. It could be, just be easier. The classes are smaller. Maybe the curriculum's not as difficult. And maybe this will stop, my kid feeling bad or, struggling so much. And so sometimes they push really hard, even when the team that's there is saying, we really think that with just a little bit of support, they can pull this out. And so there's that. Sometimes it's teachers who will try the intervention and it didn't work and go out, see, it didn't work. We got to get this kid in special ed. So the training is really to make sure that parents understand what going into special ed really means, and that maybe we make them more sensitive to the advantages of staying in general ed. Because I think sometimes we get really short-sighted. This is the solution for my kid, and you've got to help there. And then sometimes we have to work with the teachers to make sure that we don't just try an intervention one time, or we make sure it's being done right. I had a teacher I used to work with at one of the middle schools, and I was really trying to get him to do small group work, and she really didn't like small group work. And we worked on it, and I came to her class and she did it, and the kids started to screw around because they'd never done small group work in there. And she, no, didn't work, never gonna do it again, And we had to keep working on that. It's the same with interventions. They don't always work the first time. Give it another shot, or God forbid, try a second intervention.
So follow up. I'm hearing a lot about, behaviors, right? That signal to parents or teachers that a child may need to be placed in special ed. How much of that would you say was impacted by the pandemic? And how, and how, what strategies take that into consideration?
I'm gonna have to ask a question. He doesn't have to answer it for me. I just need to know this.
Did you?
Well, never mind.
She fell over.
What went? No.
Answer the question. Just tell me. What's the largest group of students?
Yeah.
Right. So this is what I thought. She just confirmed it. I'm sorry I had to break her ankle to get that information. The largest group in special education are students with learning disabilities. Okay. That's the largest group. The behavior disordered kids, we're not seeing growth in that population. However, across the school district, we had seen an increase in behaviors. But we've been trying to deal with those again through interventions and counseling and support, because these were kids who maybe before the pandemic were not demonstrating these extreme behaviors. And after, so was there an impact from the pandemic? Yes. Should that drive them into special education? I would argue no. I think they can find support other ways. Now, maybe there were some kids who got really damaged during the pandemic, then maybe we would consider that. But I think they're going to be a smaller percentage than just some kids who need some support and retraining. One of the schools I visited in the first week, they were out at the playground and the principal said, "This is so good." She goes, "It's really like it was before." She's like, "I think they learned how to do school again." And so we're there. We're getting better. Is it great? No. Do we have behaviors? Yes. Will they continue to be extreme? I'm sure, but it's improving. And with time, I think we'll see that really start to really improve.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know.
Okay. I want to just do a quick, I think we've asked all the questions we can ask on this. I'm looking at you. I mean, I think we've got the questions on the report itself, because I think we've got all of our answers to this. I didn't have a question because I had submitted my questions and all my questions came back and it was clarified. Thought you guys did a great job. And I appreciate Board Member Jackson, you taking it like the levels 1, 2, looking, I hadn't looked at it that way. So that puts it in perspective. And it definitely, underscores for me that there's a strategy across this whole strand, that it's not just about the materials, but it's really about a number of things that go into how we get to improvement towards that. And I really appreciate that conversation. I learned a lot tonight in terms of that process, and hopefully our staff and our community also hear that that we're looking at this from a very strategic lens and a very developmental lens too, right? It's going to take time, but it's also, it's a number of areas in the way that it's kind of stacked. Makes me really proud of the work that we're doing in this area. I really appreciate it. So I don't know, Ashley, if you want to have any other comments to us on this, because we're going to close. This was our monitoring session, and we're just going to go on to the rest of our agenda and finish up for the night.
Yep, I just have a couple of final comments, and then I'm gonna let you all go about your business. So I want to commend all of you for the energy you brought to this session. We started a little rocky, unsure, getting everything right. By the end of the session, I was able to lean back, and I really didn't have to provide much coaching at all. You guys did an awesome job, both from the questioning side and the answering side. And so I have a couple of recommendations for the future, for our next practice monitoring session. So I think just based, really, you are a very inquisitive board, and you don't, so some boards need a lot of delineation, and their reports need to be kind of compartmentalized into this one, this one, this one. Your reports definitely should still remain, this is the interim guardrail 3.1, that's that report, next report 3.2. But in the future, I would recommend to get the board's feedback on all of the elements present for high quality reports, and then hear presentation for all of the reports that are being presented that night at once, and then go into the questioning. So questions for the first one, questions for the second one, and then any final thoughts. I think that might help. That'll just improve the process a little bit. And it's always a learning process. Different boards have to do it different ways because that's just the way they work. So great job with all of that. I'm going to so last time I challenged you all to submit questions in advance, and you did a wonderful job with that. This time I'm going to add a layer on and add a piece to that challenge. So 1, submit the questions in advance. 2, I want to ask everyone on the board to provide at least one piece of feedback on the report itself about the level of information that is contained within. Is it the appropriate level of information? Do you need more information, or is it too much information? Because sometimes too much information can create a lot of cloudiness. So that's my challenge to the board for the next month. And other than that, great job. And so are there any questions, final questions for me before I move on?
I don't see any.
All right. Thank you all and great job, and enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you. All right. So thank you so much for sitting here with us through that. I know we're getting better. This is like an quality improvement process. So I've learned a lot. And it's interesting having been on the board for a while, but listening to it from this perspective has taught me something completely different. So I really appreciate it.
We recognize Dr. Gonzalez in his new role and how excellent he did.
Yes. Congratulations. All right. So our next item for discussion and action is approval of the consent agenda. So we've got 2 items on here. Do I have a motion on this?
Hold up here. I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second. This is Josefina.
All right, so the consent agenda items are the revision to board policy GB and revision to board policy IH8. We had a motion by Secretary Jackson and a second by Josefina Dominguez. I have a roll call, please.
Peggy Mueller-Aragon.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez. I'm sorry, Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia-Remino.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes, all right. And our last item, or not a last item, but our discussion items are a report on update on the right sizing discussion group, board president, vice president Peggy Mueller-Aragon. You have the floor.
Okay, and I want to give a big thank you to Dr. Albright. She put things together here for me, so that was very helpful. So at our right sizing discussion group, there were several topics that were discussed, and we had a really good conversation about dual language programs, which included how many schools we have, which is 61, the student participation, which is over 9,000. We talked some about bilingual seal data, though we saw there were 713 bilingual seals awarded. We saw decline somewhat at mid and high schools. And there was a conversation about the fact that there's a lack of staff often at schools. And so that is one of the reasons that they're not able to offer the bilingual seals. We also had a conversation about the native language program pathways and how important it was to have intentional pathways for dual language students to college programs and just bringing those pathways back. We talked about more support for newcomers as well. And we heard something about that during public forum. Talked somewhat about school staffing at the dual language program level and how right now there are over 50 vacancies. And what we see if we end up going to 2 sites for Coronado is that some of the staff will have to be pulled from other schools. And this seemed to be something that was rather unpopular. In order to host a dual language program, you need credentialed teachers, which is one of the most important things. And some of the factors that hinder a school from becoming a dual language school are the needs and the lack of credentialed teachers. Though there seem to be a lot that have the credentials, but that are choosing not to teach in a dual language classroom. We also discussed the different kinds of program models that are used at schools and the number of ELL students who aren't in dual language programs, because there's about 13% that choose to opt out. We talked about trying to add some public input at the right sizing discussion group meeting so people feel that they're listened to. Talked also about the number of students who follow dual language programs from elementary through high school. Then we turned to quite a lively discussion on the proposal to expand Coronado to a K-8 school. Right now, Coronado is a spotlight school, which is kind of like what used to be, I guess, an A school is what the principal alluded to. When it comes to staffing in Coronado, they are fully staffed. We also talked somewhat about Washington Middle School and about Truman Middle School, and whether there's capacity for all the Coronado fifth graders to go to those schools for middle school, and there is capacity there. And Washington Middle School is also fully staffed. As far as transfer trends, in about approximately 10 years, there have only been about 13 Coronado students that have gone on to attend Washington Middle School. Coronado has an 80-20 dual language program. That's how they start at kindergarten, first grade, and then it goes to 70-30, and then by fifth grade, it is at 50-50. Talked about the difference between Washington Middle School, which is a neighborhood school that feeds to Albuquerque High, and the difference with Coronado, which is a magnet school that doesn't feed into any middle school or high school. And we see that the children at Coronado come from everywhere in the city. And one thing that was also pointed out is that the number of students who attend Coronado that are on free and reduced, were on free and reduced lunch is rather low at only 30%. When it comes to servicing students at if we did have a fourth grade to eighth grade school, they would basically service the Coronado students. So they would go from preschool to third grade, and then from there they would go to the 4th through 8th if that's what would happen at Taft. There was also a cost benefit analysis that you all can find. It's in the packet on page 36, so you can kind of look at that analysis. And then when it came to some of the support, what we heard is that almost 67% of staff say they aren't interested in Coronado becoming a K-8 if they're split into 2 different campuses. About 33% of the staff supported 2 sites and would remain. About 17% would remain if they could only stay at the original site, and about 6% would leave if they had to go to Taft. And over 44% were really undecided. 50% when it came to families wanted 2 sites. 36% want to move to Taft, and they also, though, want to keep the non-boundary magnet without transportation, which is seemed to be a real issue for people being able to attend Coronado. Talked some more about what was offered at other dual language schools, about the wait lists and vacancies, about if we had 2 Coronado campuses, we'd have to add an assistant principal. And then also about the distance is over 5.5 miles between Coronado to Taft Middle School. So transportation was a big issue, and so equity and access is a really big concern, because who will have access? And it's going to be a lot of the kids that are without transportation or resources are the ones that won't be able to access the school. And so some of the follow-up questions were what kind of experiences, families who transfer to other schools from Coronado, and these kids that go to middle school, they go all over the city from private schools to other charter schools. We also talked about working with the government affairs team, maybe on legislation to help reimburse somewhat for transportation. And then at the end of the meeting, Mr. Wajenji just talked about perhaps what needs to be done is looking at maybe other options for Taft rather than having a 4 through 8 at Taft. And our future topics are going to be early childhood, CTE, and then we're also going to need to discuss very quickly about the Northwest and Southwest boundary changes. So that was 2-hour meeting in a few minutes.
5 minutes. There's still some work, obviously, that needs to be done. No decisions have been made. So it's mostly just as a discussion group we're working through, and we're just sort of discussing all of the options that are available and all the concerns before we finalize some places where we need to go and how we're going to move forward.
Yeah.
You have a question?
Yeah, I did. Well, first of all, I'm sure we can get a copy of what, okay, that would be great. So this is all like, you guys are going to bring forth a recommendation after all of these discussions. Okay. I guess my question regarding like the K-8, the K-8 expansion, was that requested by the parents, the staff? It was requested by the parents.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. And so it's,
Yes, it was a thought brought forward by the parents because they're noting that for them, it's that point, they don't feel like they don't have an entree into a continued school, and they don't because they're coming from all over the district. And so some of the things that we learned through this process is that they're not all like in a district, so they'd have to like, either they have to petition in or something like this, and if there's a spot, they get in. But so they don't necessarily feel like they have a middle school home. That's what the parents feel like. And we do have families that are coming. It's all over the city.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere. I mean, when we looked at the geo map, it's everywhere. Yeah, because it's a magnet school too. So there's a difference in that. It's also a magnet school, and so it's a magnet school without a boundary. So we can take kids from everywhere. And so it's become that. So I think we have to have some more conversation about, what would be some potential next steps that we can do in that. But it was a good conversation because we also kind of got an idea of where the district is with just its dual language programs. And we also found out through that process that even for families who are in this, that maybe go into a middle school that has a dual language program, they're not necessarily in the dual language program. They might get waitlisted there as well, because it depends on the number of students, the number of classes, because our regular middle schools have to run both strands as well. They're running an English and a dual language. So it's complicated. And if anything, I learned that it's really complicated, and we need to be really thoughtful on we just need to have some more conversation. And so I did meet with Dr. Blakey today. We had an opportunity to just kind of convene a little bit. So we're going to be scheduling. So she was just trying to get some clarity too. It was like, where are we going to go next and how are we going to move? So meetings being proposed, Peggy, for you and I to meet with Dr. Blakey so we could help do some planning on that so we can figure out how to move forward.
I mean, staffing is just such a big problem. And when you
issue.
talk about, there's just not, if there's 50 vacancies right now, what would happen then? So it'd be kind of like poaching, from one school to try to get them at that school. And then just some of the programs that it's called dual language, but there may only be like one first grade class that has a dual language teacher. So it's not, a real dual language school, I guess.
Well, and
so it's interesting.
It's interesting. I mean, and what's really also, I'm really proud of the fact that we have this, we do have this incredible magnet program. We do. I mean, it's an incredible magnet program. It's much more immersive, the 80, so it does have, it's a great school. There's no doubt. It's a wonderful school. It's a wonderful program. And I'm really proud of our district being the one that's got this. And so it's making this distinction between a magnet and what a magnet does and what our dual language within our traditional middle schools offers. And it's like, how do we make all of that work? I think that's the key here. It's like, how do we make it work? Can we make it work? And if it goes to a K-8 model, what do we need to make it work too?
Yeah, and how do we make it work to ultimately support the goals, right? I mean, if they're a high performing school and that is going to help, support our goals, then that's something to ponder as well. But I guess this will come to the full board at some point for a more robust discussion as well. Not that you haven't had a robust discussion. That's not what I mean to say. But
yeah. Board Member Peterson.
But it becomes a real equity issue because the fact is that the students at Coronado are not the students identified in Yazzie Martinez. They just aren't. And we can't pretend they are. And that in order to continue serving them at the level that they're being served, it basically would mean making weaker the dual language programs at schools that serve the Yazzie Martinez students and those schools. It becomes a huge staffing issue. And the reality is, by strengthening Coronado, we would weaken Truman and Washington. And that is an objective reality because of staffing. And so I think that the real challenge in front of us, I mean, I was heartened by the discussion that we had at the right sizing, because I think we really started to address two real critical things. Is one, how do we really strengthen our dual language programs and the need to look at it comprehensively? But the other thing is, how do we really change the story about our middle schools? What do we need to do objectively, but also what do we need to do to change the story that's in the community, the narrative about our middle schools that really can push back on the story that is out there about our middle schools not being safe, as being bad places, as not being a place where you would dare send your children. And those are two things that are serious issues for the district that we need to confront. And those, I think, speak very directly to the goals.
I have another, I'm throwing out a question that we need to ponder. I think I heard that we have about 50 certified bilingual teachers that don't want to do bilingual programs, must. So there are more. And I have to say, we need to look at that. I was one of those teachers who took all the credits, and then I hid that from my administrator because it was a ton of work, and I did not see that it did not abide by my standards.
And I think Mr. Cisneros, is that it? Had pointed that out to us at the committee as well, in terms of changing a differential, which they also have upped and increased, hoping that it would attract more. But the work level is definitely a concern. And so there's a lot, it's very nuanced. And it's amazing how in a right sizing conversation, this whole thing has become really nuanced around dual language and, what does it mean for this? So we kind of went down a rabbit hole on that, and we're on this whole issue of, just right sizing at campus, or the really issue is, what do we do with Taft and that particular facility? So I think we're going to have to come back and, kind of remember what's the task in front of us and look at that, because I think it's, we definitely could go in many directions, but it's been really helpful. I think it's been very thoughtful. I really have appreciated the advocates that have been on both sides, because we had a chance to listen to parents who are currently at Coronado and haven't been successful in transitioning into a middle school, and having parents who are at our middle schools that have had a successful transition into there, and we're at Coronado. So it's really a balancing act, and kudos to Dr. Blakey and the team who are trying to kind of corral us into a thoughtful conversation so that we can look at it on many sides, right?
All sides.
All sides, exactly. All right. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we'll move on to our next item, which is an update on the Community Engagement Ad Hoc Committee. And this is members Courtney Jackson and Josefina Dominguez.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, really cool things are happening. So the invites went out for the dinner and the VIP breakfast in the summit, and hopefully everybody received those. If you specifically added invites to that list, will you please just reach out to the people, because I am hearing that some went into spam. So just reach out. But what is really cool is that so far to date for the dinner, we have 43 people who have RSVP'd for the dinner. For the breakfast, we have 26 who have RSVP'd for that, and that includes 11 out-of-town guests. So we do have people flying in from literally all over the country to come to this summit to hear about our community goals, guardrails, and strategic plan. And for the summit, we have 84 people signed up so far, and there's still 2 weeks to go. So that is really exciting. Let's see. So I think I won't go into the details, but there's been a lot of work done on the board services side. So I do want to just think again, I want to thank Johanna and Christy and Shannon for all of the help that they've given to get that together. So please check your invites and make sure that the people that you added to that list get invited. Moving on to the bigger task of this community engagement committee. Some of the current plans that we have are the fall community engagement event. That is scheduled right now tentatively for October 16th to November 13th, and we're going to repeat the quadrant structure that was done last year. So it's just kind of to go back out and touch those areas again. And again, it's to follow up. We asked you what your vision and values were. We've created goals and guardrails, and now we're going back out to talk to you about that. So that is one event that's a big engagement event that is in the planning process. Some of the things that we still do need to plan, we're still working on, we're going to have a 2-year calendar. There will be aspects to this that will revolve around the superintendent search. And we are currently collecting, and this is where the board can certainly help. We're currently collecting other ideas for engagement and outreach. And the committee has started a spreadsheet or a list of some ideas. And I'll throw some of those out to you, but what I would like to ask is if you have an idea of a good engagement or something that you'd like us to add to the list to discuss, please let myself or board member Dominguez know before next Tuesday. Some of the ideas are to have a board meeting once a month that is solely dedicated to community outreach. Maybe have community engagement events that are by education level, elementary, middle, high school, maybe 3 per quarter. An idea was the board members could go out and canvass door to door, could just go knock on doors in your neighborhood. Some other ideas is that maybe the community engagement events follow the progress monitoring calendar. Or Maybe we do virtual events that are hosted by each board member. So those are just some ideas of engagement. If you have any ideas, please let us know. We are meeting next August, August 22nd is our next meeting, where we will make sure that we have finalized everything for this summit. And then we will definitely have a full plan to present to the board by the end of September. Yeah. Anything to add?
What I'm going to add is has to do with community outreach, which is different than community engagement. Community engagement is on our terms. Community outreach, I think, becomes really critical when we start talking about the Martinez-Yazzie population that we're trying to reach. That requires meeting them on their turf. And so any ideas about how we might get creative with that? Because I think that needs to happen as often as the community engagement piece. So, and preferably about the same time, I think. So yeah, just some feedback. We don't want to eclipse that population, that their perspectives. So that's all. I think you covered everything else.
And are you guys looking at it from the distinction too, I think in SOFG, so community engagement is usually done by like, what?
We
two or
host
more, we host it.
Mhm.
And so like these other things, so in terms of like going out to Canvas or virtual events, are you thinking of that also with more than one board member working as a team on that?
Like similar to what we did.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So like engagement is very much we bring people to us as
Okay.
a board. Outreach is we go out to them.
Mhm.
But to do that with another board member,
Always.
so that you're because we're always going to hear different things from any discussion. So that is, and in fact, on our planning document, we've included the definition of engagement and the definition of outreach at the top so that we always remember what that distinction is.
Okay.
So yeah, so some cool ideas. There is one cool idea that I don't think is a board idea. So I'm going to throw it out to the district just because I'm sure you guys need one more thing to do. But I saw that Rio Rancho Public Schools, they're doing a Parent U. It's called Parent University. And every month they're discussing a different topic that is specifically for parents. And I just thought that was so cool as a way to engage parents. Like the first one was on attendance, the importance of attendance. And the second one is going to be on the evolved safety system. So, I mean, it potentially could be a board thing but it was more very specific about, yeah, it's an operation thing. So I thought that was really cool to
Thank
do.
you for the suggestion. When the meeting's over, I'm sure.
Sorry.
I'm pretty sure that Dr. Muir will be happy to come over and tell you about the Parent University we've been running for the last couple of years.
Oh, Dr. Mira, I would love to hear about Parent University. Thank you so much. See, I learn something every time I come to a meeting. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Had one.
So question, go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah, we used to have an equity council or advisory group that was huge. There were a lot, it was very well attended. And then that got sort of disbanded into a more limited group and then it sort of disappeared. But back when we first joined the board, there were probably 100 people at times that showed up for discussion. Mhm.
That'd be so
So.
And what I get the impression is like on this is that it's a very targeted conversation. You bring people together for a targeted conversation on an issue where the board wants to meet you so that we can do that. I mean, I think I think that would be a great idea is to get those.
Yeah. I have a question. I'm trying to figure out the difference between the breakfast and the evening event. Who's invited to the breakfast and how are they selected? Who are these out of town folks that are coming?
Sure. So the dinner, so the enchilada dinner is on the 29th. That's Tuesday night. And the invitees to that were primarily the attendees for the community listening sessions from last, is that me? Oh, the community listening sessions from last time, from the last fall. So that's kind of a smaller group is who was invited to that. The breakfast is very targeted to like elected officials. So that's who is invited to that. And it's just about a 45-minute session. And then the summit is opened up to, gosh, I mean, there was community, yeah.
organizations. But the breakfast also includes organizations that donors. Is
The
word.
funders.
Funders.
The funders, yeah.
Funders and legislators.
Yeah. City councilors.
Could we get, and maybe it's actually on the events that Christy shares every week, of sort of the timeline of when these events happen. Maybe Christy has it on there already.
I think it is. She has included the dates, and they also sent the calendar invites out.
So what may we share and invite to a larger, what may we share and send out invitations to a larger group of people? And what are we as board members limited in doing in that process?
So I think yes, that's a good question. The summit is good for community leaders and organizations. But individuals, probably wouldn't you say the dinner?
Like like individual families to the family event. And the only thing that I would just ask, like, if you have somebody that you'd like to invite, just send it to Christy so that, sorry, Christy, I'm also giving you more work. Send it to Christy just so she can double check that they haven't already been invited. Because this was a pretty extensive list. So just double check.
We can, I mean, can't we post that list on, it's on, the invite list is on
Google,
on a Google Doc,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, we could probably just share it.
Share it.
That would be good, just like we did before when we were doing the listening sessions. So we could sort of see if there were people we knew of that were
Yeah.
included or not included.
Okay. I'm gonna share it just right now, so that everybody has it.
Okay.
That way we
Thank
don't
you.
give
I
Christy
appreciate
any
that.
more work.
Yeah, exactly.
I appreciate that.
She's busy trying to figure out what schools are available on what dates and
For the fall events in October.
for the community engagement piece, so. Anything else?
Anything else? Are you good?
No, we're done. Yep,
Okay.
that's it. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions? Good. All right. Our next Board of Education meeting will be held August 16th. Oh, well, that's tonight, isn't it? I know. It says the next Board of Education meeting will be held August 16th. I went, wait, that's tonight.
Groundhog Day.
I know, it's like, but it's on my notes. So is the next special Board of Education meeting August the 23rd, 2023 at 5:30 PM or immediately following the Finance Committee. That's what's missing on here is when's the next Finance Committee meeting? On the 23rd. There you go. Meetings will be held at the Alice and Bruce King Educational Complex, 6400 Uptown Boulevard Northeast, and live stream on aps.edu. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you. Yeah, you just threw me off. It was like, but it's on my notes. I just read what's in front of me.